The town of Farmington. Respecting history, planning the future.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the December 13th Town Council meeting and ask if you'd stand and join us with the Pledge of Allegiance. Meredith? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to begin by just wishing everybody happy holidays. Hopefully we don't have any snow when you're traveling and we have good weather, even though it's going to be cold, but good wishes to everyone. We'll begin tonight by having a proclamation. Gary?
Hello. I'd like to do a proclamation, the town of Farmington. This is whereas Joseph J. Scarazzo was born on December 10th, 1916, and was raised in New Britain and was chosen to study art under Sanford Low at the New Britain Art League. And whereas Joseph J. Scarazzo won a national art competition in 1932 and received a 4-year scholarship to Vesper George School of Art in Boston, and whereas Joseph J. Scarazzo returned to New Britain in 1933 to provide for his 4 sisters and widowed mother during the Great Depression, and where Joseph J. Scarazzo worked as a muralist from 1936 to 1939 with Sanford and Low and Walter Corden, and for the Workers' Progress Administration under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and where Joseph J. Scarazzo spent several years working as a laborer at Stanley Works in New Britain and was later employed at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft for many years, and where Joseph J. Scarazzo married Angelina Maria Latina in 1944, moved to Farmington and into the home he built in 1955, where together they raised 6 children, John, Robert, Anthony, Thomas, Jean, Joan, and where Joseph J. Scarazzo was a loyal member and past president of New Britain Art League and a lifetime member of the Connecticut Watercolor Society, as well as New Haven Paint and Clay Club, and where Joseph J. Scarazzo has several works residing in the permanent collection of the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art and New Britain Museum of Art. Now, therefore, the town of Farmington Town Council hereby wishes Joseph J. Scarazzo a very happy 100th birthday and officially declares December 13th as Joseph J. Scarazzo Day in Farmington, dated at Farmington, Connecticut, this 13th day of December 2016. Nancy W. Nickerson, Farmington, Chair, Farmington Town Council. And I hope you're watching this, Joseph. Thank you.
Yes, congratulations on a 100th birthday. I hope we all get there. Next, we're going to have a presentation by the Farmington High School Building Committee. Bill, before you start, I wanted to give a few comments on a little bit of the history of this. And I wanted, in some of the information that you might have in packets, you'll see that the discussion and about the high school and possibilities of change there or needs there was back in 2013. In fact, we had an acoustic study in May of 2013. We also, in 2013, put together, the town council did, a capital improvement ad hoc committee. And this resulted out of a discussion of what was needed in the schools in general over the whole town. As many of you know, in our capital projects and our capital budget every year, we look to put some things into to either renovate schools or do carpeting or different things that we can that we find are needed. But we decided that with looking at the high school and the needs there and over the whole town, we wanted to look and to develop a study that gave us a 5-year plan and do it more on a regular basis rather than piecemeal, particularly with the high school. We were approached about the auditorium needs, the needs in the auditorium for many different reasons at that time, which was an almost $9,000 million, excuse me, not thousand, dollar project. And we decided with this discussion that it was would be much more productive to put together a plan, a long standing plan, and what the facility as a whole needed, not just the auditorium. This was developed because of the NEASC report that had come before us, where it was clear there were some needs. Also, just funding in the basic infrastructure of the high school, ADA needs as well. So we put together, the high school looked and had Tectron come out and do a study of what the facility needs would be and how it would bring them into the future. Because of that, the the town council then decided it was necessary to put together a building committee to look further into what the needs of the whole high school were. And this was done so that things wouldn't be done piecemeal, but we could look at the whole high school and see what was necessary to bring us into the future, hopefully for the future for a long time. It was clear we needed to have an effective and efficient approach rather than just do something with the auditorium and then maybe a couple of years from then do something else for the ADA requirements. There were a number of needs that we felt needed to be met. So the Farmington High School Building Committee was put together, and tonight, as a result of that, we're going to have Bill and his committee present us with 3 plans. It's the beginning of the stages of the process of the building committee. So we're going to hear that tonight, and we're happy to have public here, and hopefully a lot of the public will see it on TV. And again, this is really the beginning of the process, certainly not for the building committee, they've been working for quite a while, but our process to have it before the public. So we look forward to your presentation tonight and for further discussions. So, Meredith.
Thank you. Since I have had the pleasure of sitting with the committee since they began their work many, many months ago, Nancy and I thought it would be appropriate and also important to just recognize the tremendous amount of work that the town staff and the school staff and the volunteer committee members have put into this process so far. We've said it here before, but we wanted to say it with you actually present, that you have a weighty task, for sure, and I've personally witnessed that every single involved member is dedicated and committed to finding the very best solution for our town. And the amount of due diligence and careful and thoughtful consideration is just so appreciated. And we also know that there's a lot more of that to come. So thank you very much.
Bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair,
Welcome.
and I'd like to thank the rest of the members of the Town Council also. I'm going to spend a couple minutes at the most catching up to date as what we've been doing for the past almost a year. You've put us in practice here in January of 2016, and since then, the important task we've had done is assemble a team of people to make this project work and be successful. So the first one is Castle Booz Architects with Chuck Booz, who's here this evening, and he's going to introduce the rest of his team. The second one is an owner project manager, Mark Skalenka from Colliers, is also here this evening, helping out. And then from our construction manager, Nelson Reese from ONG Industries. Nelson. So, as you said, what we've done over the past, I think since September, is to create 3 options that we felt were necessary for presenting to the public to solve all the issues in the Statement of Needs. And as you're well aware, the Statement of Needs is an all-encompassing document that doesn't just touch on various parts of the high school, but really looks at the entire school itself. So we felt it was necessary to take that as our guide, as we should, and come up with a solution that solves all the issues that were presented in the Statement of Needs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck Booz. He's going to introduce his team and show you the 3 options we've come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, and good evening, all. We're here tonight to present 3 concept designs for this project. The first two represent two different design approaches for extensions and renovations to the existing building. And the third concept design is for an entirely new building. It's important to note that all three designs conform to the goals and visions embodied in the educational specifications. The educational specification is a document that defines the Board of Education's vision and goals for the Farmington High School project. The development of this document is a product of almost 3 months of work that included visioning sessions with both staff and the public, and numerous meetings with the administration and staff. The final draft of the ed specs was presented to the Board of Education last evening for their review and subsequent approval. Please know that the designs that you're going to be looking at remain a work in progress, and further refinements will be based upon input from the public as well as all the other project stakeholders. Planning adjustments will be completed by the January 1st and will be submitted to the owners, project manager, and construction manager for budgeting. That will happen on or before the 3rd of February. The three alternatives and corresponding budgets will be reviewed by the Farmington High School Building Committee for purposes of choosing the preferred option that they judge to be in Farmington's best interest. Upon selection of the preferred option, we will begin preparing the schematic design documents, which are scheduled to be ready for budgeting on or about March 10th and fully complete by March 27th. The final budget due from the construction manager and the owner's project representative will be due on March 31st, and April will be consumed with pre-referendum activities in anticipation of a successful project approval scheduled for April 27th. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Paul Dominoff, who is an associate principal at Castle Booze and a long-term Unionville resident and this project's chief designer. Paul has devoted countless hours, nights and weekends, in order to maintain this project schedule. Assisting Paul tonight is Luke McCoy. Luke heads up our landscape architecture studio, and I can assure you that Luke is the real McCoy. Gentlemen.
Can everybody see the screen? It's a little bit.
We're going to darken it a little bit, Paula.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Thank you for having us. I just want to start with a big picture and kind of work our way into the three concepts. As Mr. Booth said, we have two addition renovation solutions and one new solution. So but before that, a little quick history. Some of the administration had gone up to Harvard to do a seminar that had some topics of ideal learning environments. And some of these design qualities are what we hope to incorporate into the facility, whether it's addition, renovation, or new, okay? So some of these concepts include, light, flexibility, independence, collaboration, reflection, creativity, exhibition, and joyous. So a lot of those qualities that we want to capture as we move forward, okay? And again, this is a work in progress. We're soliciting public input, so feel free to jump in if you see something you want to talk about. This is a quick snapshot of the existing facility as it stands today. As you can see, all these are additions over time. It started with the 1928 building, then 1952. There's portions that are 1964, 78, and so on. So it's been sort of a piecemeal process for a long time. So our approach and our charge is to take a comprehensive look at the whole facility and try to eliminate the sprawl and among other things that are listed in the statement of needs. So what we did early on is we have Dr. Frank Locker as part of our design team. He's a consultant of Castle Booze, and he's an educational planner, does work all over the country and all over the world. we had a visioning session, 3-day session with the administration, students, staff, and many stakeholders. And this simple diagram summarizes to me what that visioning process was all about. So this diagram shows a potential layout of a facility, whether it's addition, renovation, or new. But this is how we want to organize Farmington High School, okay, in a simple diagrammatic form. Let me walk you through it really quick. This big area here represents sort of the student zone. Everything in here, I'll break that down in a moment for you, but there's a difference between the student zone here and this is the community zone. So what you'd see in the community zone are public areas such as the auditorium, the gymnasium, the cafeteria, parts of the school that could be used by the public. And here is the student zone, and these circles represent what we call clusters. So currently the facility is organized in sort of a departmental organization where there's a math department, there's a world language department. They may be separated on floors or throughout the sprawling nature of the building. This cluster approach is new, which came out of our visioning, part of the ed spec. And what that says is within each cluster here, which I'll show you in a minute, you'll have classrooms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 classrooms, science rooms, and other support spaces, such collaboration spaces, that are all interdisciplinary. So one classroom could be world language, that could be math, this could be special ed, so it's a mix of all the disciplines in one clustered area. Based on the population, we would have in Farmington 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 clusters, that's what we're talking about, and all organized in the student zone here. And you'll see in the middle is this heart-shaped piece, and that's the library or the learning commons. And that's meant to be the heart of the whole facility, okay? So between the student zone and the public zone is the heart of the school. And if you notice this black dashed line, that represents the kind of a secure zone. So the public doesn't necessarily mix with the student area. So it's a simple diagram, but it explains a lot of how it's our roadmap, if you think of it that way, of how we want to plan the facility. So let me move forward and get into the 3 concepts. The last blow up I have here is one of those clusters. So one of those bubbles, such as this, if you blow it up and make a real building out of it, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 classrooms, 2 science rooms, prep room that is shared between 2 science rooms. We have teacher prep area. We would anticipate having glass around here so teachers can see everything in the cluster going on. And again, this could be world language, math, science over here, all cross-pollinating within that one cluster. We would have other support spaces such as toilet rooms for students so they don't have to go into the rest of the school. That could be within the cluster itself. And then we have the all-important breakout collaboration area. This is where all the classrooms get to spill out and do project-based learning efforts and things to that nature. So that's one of the clusters. We would have 6 of them. Getting right into the facility design. This is just to orient everybody. This is the existing facility as it stands, just a quick outline. This is the 2003 edition here, the 1928 building, auditorium, gymnasium. And if we superimpose, this is concept A. This is an addition renovation solution. You can see the red dashed line that was superimposed. That's what you have now, and everything in here I'll get to in just a moment. But this solution says, okay, let's take down portions of the building, and that would include in this solution, this is the 500 wing, the 700 wing, and part of the 800 wing. 800 wing is where the current library is right now. So I'm going to turn that off and walk you through sort of the big idea behind this concept is we take the clusters, these 2, and we stack them. In every solution, we have 2 clusters side by side in some fashion, but they're stacked 3 stories. So we're trying to stack the academic classrooms instead of having the sprawl, the horizontal sprawl. So you'll see that in all the solutions that we have for you today. But the big idea is to have cluster, and then a library or learning commons adjacent to, because this is really the student zone right here. This is where people would be, the students would be traveling instead of going from point A to point B. A lot of the work would be happening right here. So that's the big idea. Let me walk you through the facility really quick. People would, we'll show you a site plan in a moment, but students would enter here, or visitors, come in, administration at the front of the building. Currently it's inside the building, so we'll get everyone's eyes out front. As you go into the school, try to organize this into one, we're calling it a gallery space or a main street. So there's no more of this, zigzagging through the school as part of the sprawl. We're trying to organize the school along this east-west spine. You come into the school, clusters on your left. We have the cafeteria, and if you notice, this is the 1928 building. Currently, the receiving for the kitchen is here. We moved it around the back side, and we're going to keep the existing servery, have the existing cafeteria, expand it because we need it a little bit bigger, but have the service on the back side instead of the front. New kitchen, existing servery, existing cafeteria. Go deeper into the school. We have the library and learning commons, which is support space, some of the application labs, and this Edge Studio, which is part of their program now. We have a high volume here. This used to be the old auditorium behind the 1928 building, so we can make that a double high space. Going deeper into the building, we have the auditorium. We would transform this from a 500-seat auditorium to about 650 square foot. And at the very end of the gallery, we have tech ed, auto shop, wood shop, and above it, you'll see in the next slide, is art. So the big idea is we have an auditorium for music, a small black box theater for theater, tech ed on this level, and art above. This is sort of the performing visual arts area of the building. You could design stuff in the art above, come downstairs in the tech area and make it, and have project-based learning. Come around the rest of the building, new gymnasium. This, we're also charged with considering having the gymnasium function as a shelter for the town as well. We're working with the town for that. Potentially a public entry back here for evening events for both this gym and the auditorium. Back on the back side, fitness next to the gym could be used for the public as well. Receiving that would serve, we would repurpose this for mechanical, it's currently classrooms. It would be mechanical space that would serve receiving into the kitchen, receiving into the mechanical. And then this is the existing 900 wing that is, less than 20 years old. And we would think of repurposing this for the alternative high school, and then potentially expanding the locker rooms to make that into a field house because it's adjacent to the field. So that's the main level. I'll try to go through these a little more quickly here. Second level.
Don't worry
more-
about it, because
Oh,
we
yeah, this is great.
you don't have
Okay,
to go real quick.
okay. I know you guys have a long night. I saw the agenda.
But you're our whole meat. You're
Okay.
the important piece, so
I saw a long agenda, so.
that's okay. Thank you.
So, upper level, we have the second level of the clusters identical. We're going to stack these so it would be very economical and to build and to keep the circulation to a minimum. So this runs east-west into the library. This is the second level, mezzanine level of the library or learning commons, and you'd have more support space, maker spaces, and some collaboration spaces on the second level of the 1928 building. This is the mezzanine level of the auditorium, mezzanine level of the studio, and I mentioned earlier art, which is stacked above tech ed. And you'll notice on this solution, we're considering putting the Board of Education on a second level. It's currently a one-story building, but was originally designed to hold a second floor. So we're exploring putting the Board of Education on the second level of that, to repurpose that building. And if you notice, we're not using any of this for classrooms because of the remoteness issue. We're trying to solve the remoteness issue by trying to organize the building off that gallery. Upper level, uppermost third level, again, clusters, elevator, and the upper level of the 1928 building. Currently, we're exploring having guidance up on that level. So that's the building itself. I'm going to ask Luke to come up here next and explain how that fits onto the site.
So first, our goal for all three of these site plans was to look at circulation around the site, parent, bus drop-off, as well as pedestrian circulation, including handicap accessibility throughout the site, and then also incorporate in with that trying to make one main entry for the school so that there were no longer multiple entries for drop-offs and pickups, but then also look at additional entryways that would be used for after-hours functions that maybe are separate so that people wouldn't have to walk all the way through the building on that. So with keeping that in mind, I'll walk through the site plan and how it relates to that building. To orient, this is Route 4. This is the boulevard that comes up. We're down in this area here. So as it is today, you would come up here and we'd look to have a drive that continues up. That drive would then break off here for bus drop-off. It would continue around and host the parent drop-off in this area. Parents would come back and use this road out. Buses would come this way to here. One of the things we're looking at is at that intersection, changing that to be buses have the right of way. So when buses stack, they load the students and it's time to leave, the buses would all be able to leave in one fashion altogether so that they're not getting incorporated into parents and students trying to leave, which can hold them up in their schedules for the later schools that they do pickups. What this also allows is that this intersection, when the buses are leaving, we have plenty of room here for parents, students, all of those to stack and be able to wait for those buses without impeding other traffic on the campus. We're also looking at, in this area here, teacher or staff parking, which would be within the bus drop-off. Typically, staff is there before students start to be dropped off, so there would be no conflict between the two of those. In here would be students as well as visitor parking. We'd look to include handicap parking and visitor parking along the front portion of that parking lot so that if someone's coming to visit the school, they're able to access and come right in through that main entry Paul talked about right here. We've also looked at taking that and connecting a loop road that would run all the way around the school. So it would connect to the back. This is the area where the secondary entrance into the proposed fitness area, the gymnasium here. We'd also look at deliveries off of this and then have some additional parking here for the entrance into the alternate high school that would have its own separate entrance off of the back there. That loop road would continue, and we'd look to maintain and add to the parking that's currently off to the side of the school. That would also be used for deliveries for that tech ed and that art wing that's down in here. And then we'd look to continue and maintain that road that runs along here. One of the things we've been looking at is making this a one-way. So the loop would come through this way and come back out this way. If you were in these parking lots, you could come, and this would be maintained for this portion as two-way. But once you're back here, this would be one-way out, and everybody would come up through this way so that we're not having multiple people driving in all different directions around. Additionally, coming out of the back, you'll see the blue dots. We're looking at providing the required handicap accessibility throughout the site. That's one of the things that right now the campus does not have. So we would have to provide the access out to your concession building that's there, your baseball field, which is here, which would also include renovating the baseball dugouts because they currently don't meet accessibility requirements. The same would be for your main field, which is out here, your synthetic field and your track. Replacement of the bleachers and press box with code-compliant facilities and pathways to those. The current facilities out there are not code-compliant. And then continuing that up to the upper fields, which are located here. As you'll see here, we've grown those fields from the original 3 to 4 fields. The reason was we had a lot of comments of not only at the school level, but townwide, a lack of number of fields and constant struggles with trying to have enough fields for all the sports programs. So we looked at taking the sloped area here that is a berm and cutting that berm down, and then we can actually slide these 2 fields up and then take the original field that went this way, turn it, and then incorporate another one. And what we could look to do is taking the material that comes out of here and use it along the outside to actually berm around those fields and help to add additional screening to those neighbors that are around it. Lastly, this red here, that was part of discussions with town staff and having an emergency access onto the site. So that would be an access point that would be gated and locked and would not be used on daily activities or for events, but it would solely be for an emergency case where possibly an accident on Route 4 or along this that we had to exit or bring emergency vehicles into the site but needed a secondary entrance. So there is a small pathway there that we would look to make, as I said, gate and then provide access in. And then additionally, we'd look at walking paths and things like that that are currently used on the site, maintaining those so students could have safe access that walk from any of the neighborhoods onto campus and make sure that they can cross wherever drives are, things like that, in safe locations to enter the school. So that is option 1. I'm going to turn over to Paul to talk about option 2, unless you have any questions about A
Yes.
before.
Yes. How many spaces does this change? does this increase us by, the parking spaces?
So right now, we don't know exact numbers, but our goal throughout has been to at least maintain what you have, if not gain. So looking at these preliminary, we feel that we can at least maintain what you have, if not actually gain some, because we're fortunate enough, as Paul mentioned, by taking some of the
Right.
wings off, we've gained some extra room that we feel we can do that, as well as condensing how some of them work. We'll be able to add some parking. So we'll know that, as Mr. Booz mentioned, as we get into the late January into more defined plans. At that point, we'll have actual layouts with numbers attached.
Okay. I thought that if we have any questions about, not in general, but if you have one specific to this site, you might want to ask it now while you're, is that okay with you to do it that way? Okay. John?
Thanks for doing this, for coming out tonight. One of the things that jumps out at me immediately in looking at this specific site plan is the fact that you still have the alternative high school, or is that you're moving the alternative high school onto the campus. And I guess I would want to understand a little bit more about that. Maybe who came up with that decision and why. As you know, I've had a little bit of experience with the alternative high school in working with them in a professional capacity, and it's actually a wonderful school. But I know that the goal of the alternative high school is to educate those who don't necessarily easily fit in with a high school environment, a regular high school environment. So I guess I would be a little concerned that they were on the same campus as the regular high school environment, and that may cause some students who otherwise would want to have an interest in attending the alternative high school, possibly not attending it because of the proximity to the campus. And I guess I would also ask, where would they eat lunch? Would they, would they interact with the regular Farmington High School? I don't know if regular is the right word, but the general Farmington High School. So I think you understand the basis of my question.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the administration answer.
So, John, you're correct that we do have our alternative high school offsite, and there are many reasons for that. But during the review and the statement of need, that did come up as part of the statement of need would be to bring the alt school, our Farmington High School, alternative school up to this campus. One of the reasons is just on the program side. So our students are off-site. There are times where they can't access some of the higher level courses because they are off-site, so it limits them a bit. And we feel strongly that they should have a separate entrance and it should be separate. And in each of the options, you will see that. But that in the moments or times of the day where they could access maybe an AP course or they have a particular interest in tech ed, they would be able to access that if they were on the school site. When it comes to lunch, they would have lunch served in the alt school site. Even though it's on the same campus, it would be separate.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Kathy.
Other questions about this plan? Go ahead.
I have,
Oh,
sorry, John. On the Main Street, I thought we were supposed to have two, or potentially two different entrances for segregating the school for events. And we have a main entrance onto, we'll call it Main Street, and then for the gym.
So we have the main entry for day school activities.
Can you go to the floor plan, this one? Yeah. Yeah.
And then we're looking at a secondary entrance here. One of the things I will add that came up in last night's presentation and some comments that Paul had talked about is this may look to flip, and we may look at having that corridor on this side, which would actually split the gym and the auditorium, Black Theater, and that may be the secondary entrance. Looking at it in some comments, it may look at flipping, but the intent would be to have a secondary entrance either here or back here, which would give to this function, which is in Frank Lockhart's diagram, would kind of have that black curve that went through dotted line here. So the school functions, the library, and this would be the after-hour type events would take place in that. So that's where that second entrance here or here would allow access into that.
So where would you put the parking now? Do you?
So you
since that
would
parking is
you have
gone now?
currently here, and it wraps kind of up and around back here, and then you still have, so this area here would be parking that would access either here or here for this area. You also have the parking here, and then again, all this parking that's here that you would.
So how many
walk
spaces
around.
will we have by the
We
gym entrance?
don't know at this point.
So until you lay it out, you don't know what you're going to come up with yet?
Right. This area, as shown here, is larger than what's currently back there right now.
Okay, so I guess back to my question, this is on your radar right now, and in terms of how to have that secondary entrance, a main entrance, to, so to speak, segregate the school from nighttime activities so people don't get into this educational part of the school?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that's that black dotted curve that Paul mentioned, and Frank's, the goal was that could be a divider that could be locked, and when you have events, that area is locked, and you only stay in the areas where the events are happening.
Okay. Thank you.
Amy?
Hi, a couple. I'm not sure if you're the one to answer my questions. First of all, thank you. This is, the creativity is, I know the school well, and you guys are working very hard to make something work better. My first question is about efficiency. I mean, one of the reasons you all were employed is we currently have an incredibly inefficient building. And working within the current structure, some of the things you're going to probably bring it basically down to a shell and rebuild. But some of the things we're just going to be using what we have. I'm worried about the efficiency of what you build. The new stuff is one thing, but the old stuff, budget's going to matter, and not only the budget for today, but how much money we're saving 20 years down the road. So if someone can just speak a little bit to the buildings that we're going to keep, are we going to do anything to improve the efficiency, bring any energy efficient green things to it? I'm concerned about using some of these old structures.
Sure. You want to answer, or even though they're staying, we're still kind of renovating them and bringing them up.
Right,
too.
but there's certain things you have to
We will absolutely go through the portions that remain to renovate them, to bring them up to, we have to for code reasons. So, that is on our radar screen. So it's very early in the process. At this point, we're trying to decide what makes sense to keep, what makes sense not to keep. And, it's just a work in progress right now. But whatever we do keep, we will go through, and it would be represented in a budget that it's accounted for, too. So does that answer your question?
Sort of. I mean, I know it's a pretty fast timeline, and
Yeah.
you're going to be coming back with 3 different budgets. You're going to be coming back with 3 different budgets, and I hope you're going to be coming back with long-term, the savings in each of them. And I guess the more specific you get, the better we're able to make a decision. And my concern really is with some of these buildings that we're going to keep, the cost to make them work well or equivalent to new. I just want to make sure we're going to get the proper data, because at some point we're going to have to make a decision, and budget is going to be a huge piece of it.
Yeah, one of the guiding principles with any of these options that you see tonight is the state of Connecticut and their funding source as part of the project. One of the requirements that they're going to lay upon us is to make sure that we meet the Connecticut High Performance Building Standards, which is a energy driver for sustainable buildings. It's modeled after the LEED concept, Leadership in Energy Environmental Design. Connecticut High Performance, again, is mandatory for any publicly funded project. All 3 of these options will adhere to the Connecticut High Performance Building Standards, and within those, you have many opportunities for sustainability measures. Energy is a big one, obviously.
Right, of course.
Atmosphere, rapidly renewable materials, how the construction is sequenced, the demolition activities. All of that will be accounted for in the project budget. The design team will look at new energy systems, LED lights, high-performing mechanical systems. Customary. What's that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we'll look at, other sort of more contemporary, maybe, photovoltaic systems. I mean, those are pricey.
Right.
But there's a payback to those. And those are exercises that we'll work with the design team to explore to see which makes sense from a payback perspective as well as initial cost perspective.
Right, and that will be very helpful. I mean, my follow-up, which isn't as important by any means, When you come back to us with the next level, right now, these are wonderful concepts of how it will flow and where kids will go in and the clusters and the benefits of the clusters. But are we going to be able to see visually what some of these new buildings will look like? The design piece of it? I mean, at what point will that come?
When we have, yes, we will. Trying to think of the schedule. I think, I'm not sure if it's in January, Mark, but we'll have 3 images of what these 3 concepts may look like.
Okay, so in a much more.
Yeah, yeah, so that's part of the process, and we're just not there yet.
Are you talking about elevations?
And just what when you drive up on the
Yeah,
basic
no, so
level,
we
what is
have
going to be in front of us?
We will provide imagery of what, the massing of the building might look like,
Mm-hmm.
and, so yes, and we'll get there.
And one other question
Sure.
and that you're not going to be able to answer tonight, but it's going to be relevant, at least when I make a decision. The process of building. If you're going to work within the current structure, there are students who go to school. Just how that's going to work, how that's going to impact, how long that will take versus if you build something new and it's far, just that process will be relevant. I don't know if it will be high on the list of when we make the decision, because long-term what we want to do is what's best for the town, but I think that will be relevant for town people and students, because we still have to educate our students.
Right.
So at that point, we'll get, I assume, that information?
Yes, we are actually starting to explore that now, because we can't wait until, we're ready to start construction, because it does have an impact on cost and budget and how. So we actually had a meeting earlier today at Casabuz's office to talk about phasing and how that could work. It's easy with the new building, not easy, but it's
Right,
easier
it's-
with the new building because you're not talking about displacing students.
Right.
What we're also doing is coming up with big picture schedules that look like this, right? So here's a new building schedule, and here's a renovation schedule. These are both drafts, very raw, that we just developed today, that will be further refined as we go through the next couple of weeks. Phasing the renovation options and the addition options will be cumbersome. Students will be safe. I mean, we do this every day in the academic arena. But it will be more surgical. It will be,
Right.
we literally went through this 2 hours ago.
No, well, luckily you have a sprawling
Build
building,
this
so you can.
and renovate here, because we want to make sure that if we're taking something offline, where is that service going to be provided? I just asked the superintendent if she was available next Wednesday, so we can meet with her, because they were trying to figure out how we could work with the administration to maybe figure out ways to get this done without having to bring in portables or temporary classrooms or really displace some of
And
the
that costs
students.
money.
All of this
When you
costs
come
money.
back to us with final budgets and final proposals, every piece of that cost would be helpful. From the cost of bringing things in, if you're working within this, to the cost 20 years down the road. The more data you bring us, the more we can make a good decision.
Yes, all of that will be, it has to be, because the last thing that I want to do, or anybody sitting in that front row wants to do, is come back and say, we need more money.
Yes.
We don't do that.
Good.
So.
Awesome. Thank you.
John?
To start with just a minor piece, when you lay out the exterior, I'm assuming that the road that's going to contain the buses is long enough to hold all the buses?
Yes.
So, so there's no, the buses aren't going to back into the public driving in?
No, that would be the goal. They will have their own set of dedicated drop-off. That is one of this. You can see the challenges, and you can see on the plan that the white is the existing portion of the building that Paul mentioned we're going to keep, and the brown being the addition.
Right.
This piece does push slightly this way, which does make this slightly smaller, but we're making sure as we get further into design, all of that fits.
Okay. The second piece, which is a bit more complicated, I know that when you originally came up with this new option A, a lot of the discussion was around state reimbursements. Could you walk through the rules about what state reimburses, and what levels, and how the buildings qualify?
Sure.
It might be helpful to go back to the FHS additions.
Yeah, I don't know what, it doesn't really matter what.
I think it's the one before that, yeah.
So, the state of Connecticut, which will be contributing, dollars towards this project, there are really three approaches. There's a new construction, which is simple. There's renovation like new, and then there's extension alteration. All projects start as extension alterations, and then you need to qualify to meet renovation like new status. What that means is, if your reimbursement rate is 29% on a renovation project, okay, to meet one of the criteria for renovation like new, 75% of that existing facility has to be over 30 years old. It has to be maintained and renovated as part of the project. We don't have 75% of the existing facility that's 30 plus years old. So automatically, we don't qualify for renovation like new status, which is to say, all the money you put into the renovation gets reimbursed at 29%. We don't qualify. So now it's a bit more surgical in the sense that where we're repurposing existing spaces, we do get the 29%. Where we're taking existing classrooms and cleaning them up, you don't get reimbursed for that. So your ineligibles are higher on an extension alteration project. But we're going to work strategically to make sure that we maximize the reimbursement from the state to the town in a repurposing effort. Clearly, the 2003 areas are not open for reimbursement in any capacity because it's less than 20 years old. New construction is at 10% less, so you're at 19% for the new construction. So those areas will get reimbursed at 19%. If you're looking at the whole new building, that's all 19% versus the 29%. So I don't know if that answers your question. I know things are changing rapidly up in Hartford in terms of the reimbursement process. Their guidelines are under consideration for changing. We're aggressively looking to pursue a grant application for June 30th, 2017, which is prior to the new guidelines becoming law. There is a benefit to Farmington if that were to happen, because the new guidelines that we're exploring, the design team has been working with the state to see which guidelines work well for Farmington. And at this point, we haven't found a lot that do. I'm not surprised because they're looking to spend less money, not more money, on school construction projects. So we're going to be creative with how we pursue our grant application and the reimbursement request. And back to the finances, when we do show costing models for each of the options, you'll see an estimated state contribution for each of those options. Farmington share, state of Connecticut share.
But there's a couple key things there. One is July 1st,
Right.
the rules change, and it'll mean less reimbursement by the state. So it's important for us to get a project through before July 1st.
It'll mean harder guidelines to meet to maximize reimbursement. Not necessarily less, but it'll be harder to achieve the maximum reimbursement. They want buildings to be smaller. So they're going to say, okay, we'll give you X amount for this size building. Well, if we really need that, and the existing guidelines allow us for that, well, you get more reimbursement back. It doesn't change the rate, it just changes how much we are eligible for.
But so if I'm understanding this, the portions of the building that are listed as 2003, the renovations we do there, we don't get reimbursed at all for.
Correct.
The portions that are on there that are 30 years old or more, if we repurpose parts of those areas, we get 29%. If
It's not just 30 years, to anything, the 96, the 64, the 78, whatever other years, 52, any of those that are repurposed, you'll get the 29%.
So is my understanding that the things that were between 20 and 30 years old get treated a little bit different?
Nope.
Well, I thought one of the diagrams that was listed as, you showed three different.
Yeah.
That was a-
Three different ways.
No, I think as things have evolved, we have had more information since when,
Okay.
at the last building committee, when we
All right.
were talking about it, because John, you're correct of what you were saying, and that we showed that other chart up.
Right.
Excuse me. That has evolved, and what Mark has said is what our understanding is.
Okay. And lastly, one about this matter, this concept A, maximizes the state reimbursement. That's how it's intended to do it, to focus on maintaining the 75% of the oldest building, whereas the others,
Well, again, this
get lower.
option, it's hard to say maximizes state reimbursement. This option maximizes using existing facilities, but it doesn't maximize state reimbursement. I can't say it because, again, we don't qualify as renovation like new because of we don't have at least 75% that's 30 years or older. So that's off the table. Now we're just looking at ways to creatively meet the statement of needs, the educational specifications, either with as much existing building versus new, vice versa. The next option you'll see has less existing and more new. It's just, it's not about maximizing reimbursement. It's alternate approaches to the work.
all right.
Either way, any of these options, we're going to look to maximize as much as we can from the state.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My last question has to do with, and this is probably more for the architects. In this option A, as well as the other options, the classroom space is all brand-new building. So there's 2 wings of brand-new building. One wing happens to be right on top of the circle, and the other happens to be right on top of the 800 building where destruction. Did you give any thought to taking those 2 brand-new buildings and put them in the current auditorium parking lot so that to minimize the impact to the students?
Yes, we explored these 2 clusters. We really had 3 positions we could put them. We could put them here, we could put them over here, put them over here. And over here, it's because of the property line, it gets really tight,
Okay.
and it's a difficult fit. We explored it, and I could show that to you if you
Fine.
care to see it at some building committee.
I take your word.
Yeah, so.
Thank you.
John?
Just to clarify, and I know your confusion from the last building committee meeting, just the process, so you know, is I did that exercise to try to do the renovate as new, and I went to the state to visit them, and they gave me additional information that Mark just relayed to you. So that effort didn't pan out. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
John?
Yeah, Madam Chair, would you mind if I just backed up a little bit for my
Yeah.
own edification? Just because I didn't realize we were going to jump right into presentations of the building. And if you don't mind, I just would like to get a better understanding, I guess, of the role of the renovation committee, how they got to where we are looking at these buildings right now, and then follow up with what the role of the town council is. So how do we make an informed decision? And I guess really what I'm referring to is when I look at the charge of the building committee, number 3, letter A is that you do an extensive review of Farmington High School facility report prepared by Technin, and I'm assuming that was done, and a statement of needs came out of that. And then the next 2 letters are B and C, which is after the review is completed and working through the superintendent of schools, the committee will prioritize the high school facility needs based on the statement of needs. I was wondering, do we have a list of priorities, and was that list of priorities used in developing this? And is that something that we have, that we're privy to see? And then I guess once those needs are prioritized, the committee will develop various strategies. I'd be interested to hear what the strategies were based on the prioritized list as to how we got to these 3 options so that we can make this decision.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Appreciate your comments. As I stated either here before this evening or certainly in earlier presentations, we took the statement of needs as our worksheet. So we didn't prioritize in the statement of needs because they came through as a document we were felt obligated to follow. So we did that to the letter. So when we're talking about, and these are some of the bullet points off the statement of needs, one of them is travel distance. Because of the way the school was constructed, single level all throughout its history, except for the 1928 building. That was an issue that we felt was important. Is it important overall? Is it that critical to solve that particular issue and not something else? Maybe, maybe not. But it was part of our statement of needs. We felt obligated to address travel distance. ADA, I think that goes beyond any explanation. I mean, we just have to make this building conform to ADA. There are many parts of the building that do not conform to ADA. The auditorium, the stage, music instructional spaces, some classrooms, the chairlift and the weight room, the media center, bathrooms, portions of the 1928 building, culinary space, and outdoor athletic facilities. When you talk about these spaces, you're talking about a great proportion of the building. So we looked at it as an all-encompassing project. We didn't say we're going to leave the gymnasium as it was because, or the practice gym as it was because it doesn't need all that much work. Because somewhere along the way, it's going to fit into one of these categories. Safety and security. I mean, that was another issue with statement of needs. We don't want to compromise that, especially in these times. So we were looking at the entire school in terms of safety and security. 23 different entrance points or exit points into the building. It's a lot. It's a lot to cover. It's a lot to maintain. Most of you that go into any public building, if you have that many buildings openings, one of them is going to be open at any point in time. It's just the way things work. Inefficient building envelope. Again, the single-story additions throughout the ages. They're not capitalizing on any efficiencies in terms of the building operation, in terms of the wall systems and roof systems to make sure that you're energy efficient. And aging mechanical and electrical systems. 1928 was 88 years ago. I mean, this building has been added on to 5 different times. You know that some of the electrical mechanical systems that are operating for a long time and have gone beyond their useful life. The cost of energy, again, part of the envelope system. Undersized components, the auditorium, the cafeteria, and the library. You look at those core areas, and when you look at the diagram, they take up a big part of the core area. So, you really have to attack the whole building. And then inefficient building footprint, I think we talked about that. Efficient, functional, flexible learning. We embraced 21st century learning. We had Frank Locker come down here. Castle Booz was the only architectural design firm to come in and bring an education consultant on board for us. We heard about what's going to happen in the future, and we're looking forward to being part of that as opposed to being left behind. So when you see the clusters, and you're going to see them throughout the presentation, that takes away from all this sprawling classroom space that you see in the existing facility because the way that they're stacked, the way they're built, they're efficient, and they promote the 21st century learning that we're looking for. And then finally, the parking for both the school and the public. And we all know there's inadequate parking up there. We need to increase the amount of parking so that it can serve as a function for both the Farmington High School and for the community. So there's nothing that we couldn't take as a priority and say we don't want to do this, or we can label things A, B, or C, or 1, 2, 3, and 4. We felt the need to address all of them, which these proposals that you'll see tonight do. I mean, any decisions beyond that, I think that's a discussion between the council and the committee as to, what you feel is not important or not as important that you could use to reduce the cost of the facility or the size of the facility. So that's how we came up with the work we came up with.
Bill, I just wanted to remind you, and also I have the document, that the board did prioritize, and we did study that at the beginning at the committee level. Part of the statement of needs, they did give their listing, which you did highlight all of it, but there was a priority list given out. Just part of our statement of needs, we did want to.
2-pager.
So.
Okay, so what you're saying then basically is that the priority list is the statement of needs, and so that everything is a priority. And so with that, all 3 concepts address all
of the issues
yes. that are in the statement of needs. And so basically the 3 concepts, what differentiates the 3 concepts? What is it? Is it a price thing? Is it a timing? What can
it's a function thing, obviously, and there's a price. There's going to be price points between the 3 options. Once you see them, I think you'll notice some of the subtleties of the difference between.
Okay.
Except for the new facility, obviously, that's pretty clear cut.
Right. Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Meredith.
I'm going to jump us back to concept A. Is that okay? All right. And this is a simple, I think, Paul, this is probably you. Sorry. But in concept A, did robotics make it in?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Where? Because that was one of my questions. How is that going to be?
Robotics, we met with, so as part of the process, we met with all the different teacher groups and staff in each discipline. And what we came up with is having a wood shop and an auto shop and robotics right in the middle. So the need was to have, robotics doesn't need their own shop. What they'd like to do is share the shops. So we incorporated that.
Okay, and then when we added the fields here, are they 4 full-size fields, or did you shrink all of them? How was that?
No, there actually would be 4 full-size multi-sport fields. So we've
Okay.
looked at being able to hold a varsity JV. We can fit soccer, which is the largest out of the 5 multi-sport fields. We can host that. You wouldn't be looking to hold tournament for state play because we're not able to push all the way out to 75 yards, but we're looking at 65-yard width. And we didn't accompany bleachers and that up there because it gets tight there. But they would be full-size fields.
Okay, great. And I especially appreciated what you were saying about maintaining the safe walking paths from the neighborhoods, because while many exist, I'm not sure how safe or well-maintained they are. So I really appreciated that. I have a question on the emergency access. To make that, I guess, accessible for the emergency vehicles that may need it at some point, is there any private property that would be impacted on either side of that red line?
No, the goal is in looking at early on with the dimensions there, and our understanding is at one point that was designated as an emergency access, but was never formally, it's kind of maintained, but was never formally, but it's there in case of one. So we're going to make sure that it would actually function if you ever do need to use it.
So no private property impact?
No, our goal is not to impact private property with this project.
Okay, great. And one last question, and I think this is what part of what Amy was getting at in terms of the sight line of this and the aesthetics. One thing that I think we're kind of lacking now is an entrance, a main entrance that says, this is Farmington High School and this is where you go in the door. I mean, it seems to lack a front door. Is that, because now looking at it, it kind of looks tucked in around the side or the back. Will that be a visual focal point?
Yeah, we're going to work on that. We haven't developed any three-dimensional massing yet, but that would be the next step in our process. And we understand the need to have a main entry that's highly visible, highly secure, and is sort of a signature entry for Farmington High School.
Thank you.
Peter?
Just one quick, you just mentioned fields. Are those going to be natural grass or turf?
Right now, we're looking at them as natural grass.
Huh?
So,
Just had to throw it out there.
you know, if the comments are raised that another synthetic field at the high school is an option, it's something we can look at, including into cost estimating.
I'm just asking if it was part of your discussions, just purely asking.
It is, and I'll explain later in one of the schemes and why, but we were looking at natural grass, right?
Okay.
Gary, any?
I had a quick question on the renovation project, option A. You're showing mechanical custodial. Now, are we bringing everything under one major plant for boiler and cooling for the whole facility now, or are we still going to break it up into separate rooftops? Or
Yeah, it's also early. We have our mechanical engineers on board. They're just getting their head wrapped around the site and the layout of the building. So we have multiple opportunities at this point. Right now, we're showing a mechanical custodial area here. There's also boilers below the 28 building, and we may end up with some rooftop units as well. Still work in progress.
But
Sure.
We've done a number of these large extensions and renovation projects, and the idea is to create a new mechanical space. And as new portions of the building come on, that mechanical space, the new mechanical space, serves those new sections. And as sections come on right till the end, and finally that new mechanical space has the entire building being serviced by it. That way you're able to maintain your existing boiler plant without disruption, and you just take those sections of that existing boiler plant offline as sections of the building comes down. So there is a method to that madness.
so now, besides boilers, now we're going into standards for air exchange and everything. Rooftops, all that stuff will be up to date in all the buildings? Because once we touch
The entire,
something, we change
the
them all.
entire building will be completely and totally updated and energy efficient and as green as it could possibly be.
Yep.
The number of rooftop units will vary with their function. For instance, the large spaces will probably be served by rooftop units, but the rooftop units need to have a heat source somewhere.
Right.
So that would come from the plant.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Amy?
I have a general question, and just to follow up what we were talking about. You talked about funding that we get from the state, and whether it's 19% or higher. You've done a lot of these projects. What is the likelihood, assuming you follow the regs, that we get that percentage and that we can?
Oh, you'll
count?
get the percentage.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a matter of what's eligible.
Okay.
That's the dialogue, that's the conversation that you have with the state. And they're not going to say,
Your experience, because we've had issues with the state, this is giving the money that was promised. You've never had an issue on, it's really just
once
what
they've
pocket you
committed,
fall into.
yeah, once they've committed to the dollar value, we've never had an issue with them reimbursing our clients.
And when do they commit to that? At what stage? Do we need to have, dig a shovel in the ground?
So what'll happen is the grant application will go in and say by June 30th of 2017, you'll get your grant commitment the following year. So July of 2018 is when you'll get your grant commitment. Lots of conversations, lots of dialogue between June of 17 and July of 18 will occur so that they understand the scope, the dollar value, eligibles, ineligibles, and they're willing to work with districts. I mean,
But we'll know exactly where we stand before we start building.
right.
But the other thing is, just like the treatment
you
plant.
know why I'm asking
Yeah,
this question.
absolutely, yeah. But just like the treatment plant, you have to bond, you have to authorize for the total amount regardless of the grants. And
Right.
so you have to put in the whole amount, and then you'll know what your grants are.
Is
so.
it a similar, the treatment plant, we get 2% interest. Is it is
That
there
came-
anything like that, or no?
No, that came from the Clean Water Fund, so not through that.
And what will happen is once we have our grant commitment in place, we can start requesting reimbursement back to the town on a every other month basis, and we can project out 3 months. So every other month, we'll be able to issue an EDO 46, which is, okay, here are some expenditures, reimburse us, and so that happens. So they don't wait until the end to cut you. It's on a every other month basis.
Okay, thank you.
Now, another question, I have a few questions. First of all, the funding that we get, of course, just to say it again, has to be done by June 30th, 2017. I mean, our plan has to be passed by then to get the reimbursement that we're talking about now.
The grant application has to be in by June 30th of 2017 to meet the current guidelines.
Correct. So these reimbursements that we're talking about, the possibility of those reimbursements only occur before June 30th of 2017. For sure. We don't know after that what those reimbursements will be.
We don't know how they're going to affect the overall program moving forward. They may reimburse less,
Right.
not on a percent basis, but what's considered eligible or ineligible may be less the following years.
The likelihood is, and it won't be more.
Not going to be more.
No. Okay. So it's important for us to move forward, and that's why we appreciate everyone getting on board and really moving forward, other than the fact that we know we need some changes at the high school, so that certainly goes without saying. Okay. A couple things I want to get to are, it looks now like the plans, at the very beginning, there was discussion about classroom and what the classroom space had to be for state guidelines. And now, with the way the plan is, it appears, and correct me, because I don't immediately tell me I'm wrong if that's it, but it appears that all the classrooms are new. So we'll be developing the square footage of the classrooms will be what the state now says is our classroom, rather than 764 square feet, because that's what it was before, but now we'll be at the guideline, which was 950 square feet? Is it, how is that affected?
You're right, it was 900 square feet in a new method that the state's doing after the change. But we had, because Farmington has smaller class sizes, that template's based on 25 kids per class. Farmington has 20 per class. So what we had conversations with the state, worked with them. We opted to take that 900 square feet, make it 810 square feet, and take that extra square footage and slip it into the collaboration space. So we reallocated it because that's what the 21st century learning spaces are all about. That's one instance where we had conversation with the state and that worked. So we took that extra square footage out of the classroom, which was oversized, and put it elsewhere. That make sense?
And so that that is the size of our classrooms that you've configured in this building.
That's correct.
And there's a comfort level that if you have larger classes for some reason, you have a space to put them in. If okay.
You can have, many, many more students in that space, but that flexibility, we wouldn't do it in every cluster, but a couple we would do that to create that flexibility when we schedule and possibly have more students than, a typical classroom would have.
So you'd address that need in that manner, which is
Right.
great.
Yeah.
So if you do have 50 kids, for some reason you have something, you'll be able to do that in certain classrooms.
Yes.
And so the state, just to be clear, the state has said that's okay, and you can still get the funding, the reimbursement at that level for that change.
That conversation didn't really have to do with funding. It had
Oh.
more to do with the space, the new space needs requirements that are changing in a template form. So we used that as a guideline as the ed spec was developed. Didn't really talk about the funding component of it. It was just how much space does Farmington need? And that's what formed the basis of the ed spec.
Also, I want to ask about the square footage of the school. I know that it was previously the 218,000 square feet currently is what we're looking at. And we're going to supposedly the 222, it goes up. But you're beyond that, I think.
That's correct.
And if it's beyond what the state says is appropriate, there is no state funding. Is that correct as well?
That's our understanding.
I have a concern about that.
Not 100%.
Not meeting, we have to meet our
if
needs.
you exceed the space standard guidelines, there is an opportunity to still maximize your reimbursement. You would need to file a space standard waiver, which is to say, we have specialty programs here. We have unique programs that don't fall within your national average guidelines. And here's why here's why we have the additional size of the building. Previously, it was notwithstanding legislation that provided that approval. They are now moving that towards the Office of the School Construction Grant Review Administration in Hartford, so it's not legislative, it's more administrative. And what we've been doing recently with clients is walking, and almost every client has a building that exceeds their standard guidelines. Again, these are national averages that they're using. They're not necessarily consistent with New England Northeast school buildings. And they have come out and they have walked the site and studied the plans and have been receptive to allowing a larger building for SPED or robotics or alt high school or other specialty spaces. It's wants versus needs. They're not going to approve everything, we don't think, because just because you want a culinary arts program doesn't mean you need a culinary arts program. And back to the comment of looking to spend less versus more, they are tightening their belts. I mean, clearly they're tightening their belts up there. So we'll engage in an active conversation about maximizing the reimbursement. If we're still not happy with the end result, we can go notwithstanding legislation and have the legislators approve the enlarged building. So just because we're over doesn't mean that we don't get state funding. We would lose state funding for that, but we're going to work to get that funding for that additional square footage.
Okay. And I will qualify that by saying, I think what we're doing is we're looking to bring our school system and our town into, the 21st century education with years ahead in mind. We don't want this for 10 years. I personally would like to see this go into the future. We don't want to be doing this every 10 years. This is a huge undertaking. And that we do need to do something for our town. And hopefully with your expertise with everybody working together, we'll get that for, another 40 years to have this, rather than this piecemeal effect. And I'm hoping this, we're looking at all these options, and we're going to go through the other two. I know you probably answered most of our questions at the first option. But certainly we want to do what we need to do for the schools, and, with the administration, with, and looking at what our needs are to move us into those years out. We certainly want to make sure we look at all the avenues, but we certainly all, as we're all cognizant of, the dollar is going to, go out to our public, and we want to be as careful as we can for our constituents to say this is really cost effective. Certainly with all the energy and everything, it's going to be a much better, we're going to be able to have savings, I would think, in the future.
And the
so.
state's a partner. They're not an adversary. They're an ally to us. We're working with them. They're working with us.
That's great.
They want to use Farmington as the guinea pig for this new system, and we tried it. It doesn't seem to be working to our benefit, which is why getting the application in before July 1st is really important. But they've been really, really good at meeting with us and hearing our issues, and they want to work with us. I mean, the director is a Farmington resident of the OSC GNR, so he gets it. He wants to see the school here as functional and aesthetically pleasing as possible. So yeah, I mean, again, there will be some tough conversations, but ultimately we'll do everything in our power to make sure that Farmington is well represented and maximize their reimbursement.
Yes, and we appreciate that. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions right now about A or anything? Okay, on to B.
So just to orient everyone again, quickly, this is the same outline of the existing school, 2003 wing, 1928. We superimpose option B. The red line represents the existing footprint. This approach says, let's remove the 500 wing, the 700 wing, 800 wing, and remove the existing cafeteria, okay? So that's the big thought. And what happens when you do that, there we go. What happens when you do that is the big idea is to take these clusters, instead of having it cluster side by side in a learning commons over here, or library, you take the cluster and you orient them in a north-south direction, and you have the learning commons right between the two clusters. So you're not traveling near as much. And it really is, if you think back to Frank Locker's diagram, that really is the heart of the school, centered between the learning communities and these clusters. It's also geographically located in the center of the whole composition. So that could work nicely. So let's walk through the school coming in from the beginning again. This is the 2003 wing. We would think about putting a new entry over here, administration out front. As you go into the school, you're at the clusters. You'd have some shared maker spaces between the clusters. Perhaps we have special services like the Friends Room that exists near the cafeteria today. As you lead yourself into the down the gallery, we have the Learning Commons, which is a multi-story, two-story space where these clusters are three-story. And this almost think of this as we relocated the cafeteria, so it's almost one continuous space. Right now, this is where the principal's office is, right here against the glass. But we have kind of this linear arrangement with the cafeteria. So that could be, if you think about almost a student union in a college atmosphere, that's what this could simulate, where this would be a sort of a one-story space, but this could open up into a multi-story. And we'd have I can show you some images, but an oversized bleacher kind of stair system where kids can collaborate and congregate, and it could also double as vertical circulation between the levels. So this could be a nice space. As we move deeper into the down the gallery, we would reuse the auxiliary gym, and we would propose a new gymnasium just opposite. So that's a pretty good relationship right across the corridor. As you go deeper, this is the existing gymnasium right now. We would put the studio black box theater in the gymnasium, current gymnasium, and have the auditorium just opposite. So that's a good relationship. And then again, you have the tech ed with art on top. So between these high masses, we have band and choral, which supports the auditorium. And then we have the locker rooms that would be renovated that would support the auxiliary gym and the main gym. As we go around the building, again, we'd repurpose the 2003 building for the alternative high school and potentially some locker rooms adjacent to the field. This solution says, let's take the 1928 building and introduce the Board of Education into the 1928 building. And on this side, we're talking about mechanical and some receiving to service the kitchen and servery into the cafeteria. So if we go upstairs, we again have this cluster configuration with some of the maker spaces and the Edge multimedia studio between the clusters. These would be stairs leading down into the Learning Commons below. The Learning Commons would have its own associated classroom and workspaces for the staff. Above the administration, we would, in this scenario, think about putting guidance. So what could work nicely is if a parent came into administration down below, we could think of adding a stair that could lead people right up to guidance so that they don't have to traverse the school to make an appointment with guidance. They can come in, get their credentials, go upstairs, meet with a guidance counselor and their son or daughter, and then they could exit the building without going deep into the school. As we work going down the gallery more, we get to this visual and performing arts wing again with the art and the mezzanine levels of both the small theater and the auditorium. Upper level of the Board of Education on the second level here. Uppermost level is we have the clusters again connected by a corridor, and here we have an opportunity to introduce a green roof on top of the Learning Commons or library. And we also have an opportunity, we could think about having an outdoor terrace as well. And then lastly, the uppermost level of the Board of Education in some configuration up here. And Luke will talk about the site.
Again, like the last option oriented with Route 4 here, our Boulevard Drive, what we'd be able to do is take this road and continue it straight up into the site, again providing the bus drop-off in this location, the parent drop-off in this location, down to a single main entry point right there. As you can see with this scheme, because of the flipping of the clusters, we're actually able to accommodate a larger bus drop-off area with this plan. We'd again continue that to the rear where we would have a small parking area where we'd have access in for that alternate high school there. We continue around, we'd have parking and deliveries off to the side here, as well as deliveries in the area Paul mentioned here. One of the changes here is we'd actually look to push this loop road out a bit over to that hill to accommodate some parking right in this area directly in front of the proposed Board of Education in that 1928 building. As we continue around the back of the site, again, leaving the tennis courts, the baseball, your main stadium field, we would again provide the accessible routes and updates we need to on the site. And again, the 4 fields to the rear and the emergency access. So the main changes here would be, this would be the bus drop-off would be larger, and we would accommodate parking for that Board of Education area there. So that is option B. And then call for option 3. Would you like to talk about B?
Yes. When you say the front part there with the parking, just in the front of the old building, the 1928 building?
Here.
Does that mean you'd have to bring in some, whatever you bring in to make the hill? And where's the F in this?
This option, the F would have to be recreated. It would be moved out.
I love that
We'll
you
have
said
to-
recreated.
It would not go away, but yes, we would. And that's simply because this function, we did want to look at proposing some parking directly there so that someone coming to visit Board of Education would not have to park here or here and walk. What we may find as we further develop these, that road and that bump out and that parking may be able to tuck in a little bit closer, and we may have over-exaggerated what it looks like on the site plan, but just so that everyone can see visually from this far back on this small scale, we wanted to show that that was our intent there.
So the sliding hill might still be saved.
I was going to say, more important than the
Right.
F, will you be able to sled?
Right, that's right, the sliding.
Yes.
That is busy in the winter. And just one more. When you come out to the emergency road, is that Crosswoods? Do you know if that's, it's Crosswoods Road? No, the crossroad, McGovern's is on the
You're talking about
corner.
the actual road.
Yeah. Yeah, Knollwood comes this way, but is that Crossroads? that
Yes.
comes in?
I'm being nodded yes from the.
Okay, because
rest-
that
who was-
now is the real road, and it just comes out, yeah, it's just, there's a path there, so that's just going to be enlarged on the school property.
It'd be large enough to accommodate emergency vehicles. And again, gated, as we talked about.
Windwood.
Yeah.
It's Windwood.
It's Wynwood, okay, yeah,
Crosswood is on the other side of the building.
okay, but Knollwood is up and down, it's Wynwood then, okay, I know where it is, thank you. Okay, other questions for anybody? For
I just have one.
Peter?
So you would be moving the cafeteria to where the current, in the area where the current offices are, and then push that into the 1928 building, or just behind it?
That is correct, yes.
So isn't that like a tricky area, dealing with that 1928 building, pushing everything into there?
Well, it's not within this is the definition of the 1928 building as we see it, right?
Yeah.
But in the back, there's actually, see this dash line right here?
Yeah.
I completed it. That's the old auditorium that was originally built with the 1928. That's a high-volume two-story space. So this portion could have a high ceiling here. So it's behind what you perceive as the 1928 building.
So it's an L-shaped cafeteria?
Yeah, it's an L-shaped cafeteria, and we could use, trying to use the cafeteria also as circulation, so students, it can do double duty as the cafeteria and circulation. And it would also lead right into the library adjacent to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Amy?
Just a quick observation. To me, it looks like you have some great opportunities for the outdoor space between the clusters and the cafeteria and the clusters and the special services. Has anyone brainstormed yet as to what you think you might do with those spaces?
No, but we are thinking that could be outside space. Yeah.
I mean, from a learning opportunity or from a, collaboration spaces and, I mean, how large are those approximately?
This width here?
Yeah, what's the
It's to be determined. What we're trying to do is split the difference. If we kept this building here and kept that edge, we'd want to locate that somewhere right in the middle so that, that's equidistant to that. So we're going to work on
I
it.
think there's so much you can do with that space. So.
Sure. No, agreed.
Especially if you're going to be doing a lot of windows. If
Yes.
the original goal is windows and light.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot you can work with there.
Another point on this cluster configuration is we could take advantage of some of the views from this breakout space down towards the Farmington River, and this could orient up towards the turf field as well. So, yeah.
And having that third, I mean, if you're going to have a terrace on that third floor, there's, again, enormous opportunities.
That's correct. Yeah, agreed.
What is I see the Board of Ed on that space, but is the rest of the purple, does that mean Board of Ed as well?
Yep. Currently, it's the, we have the Board of Ed occupying all levels of this building.
Oh,
We're
right.
currently in the process of figuring out how much space is actually needed. We may not fill that completely. So we don't have a good layout yet of each level of the Board of Ed. We just know that wants to be designated for the Board of Ed space at this time.
Okay. And could you, or maybe it's Kathy, explain what the new library kind of configuration now that it's here as the Learning Commons, and right now we have an upstairs that go, and so what's the change in that? Can you just tell us, please? Okay.
So all of us would think of a traditional library used to, and it was designed for quiet, independent research and reading from a collection of books that would be housed in that space. But now we are, looking at Learning Commons, replacing more of that traditional library space. We have actually an example at Noah Wallace of a Learning Commons where they redesigned the space. So a Learning Commons is often referred to as the heart or the hub of the school. It's a space designed to be open and inviting with flexible and adaptable space and furniture that really accommodate multiple purposes. So whether students are doing research and reading, which we typically think of in a library, a Learning Commons would continue to house a collection of texts that students would be able to use as they do their research. But it also would have a great deal of technology. There'd be opportunities for small group study, and we have an emphasis on collaborative work and project-based or inquiry-based learning. So students would use the Learning Commons to meet together in small groups, in the conference rooms, or cluster together in seating areas. They would have access to whiteboards and technology and flexible seating so that they really could lead their own learning in this space. It's also a place for independent, quiet study. Some students do need quiet space, and so students would be able to find spaces in the Learning Commons where they could read and write and think without interacting with others. And students in this generation are accustomed to working independently in public spaces and even within stimulating environments. So soft seating and comfortable work surfaces would be dispersed throughout the space. Teacher collaboration, whether it's teacher to teacher or teacher to student collaboration, would be another aspect of the Learning Commons, and really open up the space for our teachers to collaborate with each other and to have more partnership with our students. So typically an open space or cafe-like area that would encourage conversations and informal meetings among adults and students with high-top tables and stools or longer tables and benches. And then there is a classroom space that's planned for the Learning Commons, and this would be a continuing need for direct instruction as well as possibly for whole group learning through video conferencing or webinars, other multimedia learning opportunities. And exhibitions and presentations. So that's always a challenge at the high school. We often have to use the cafeteria for that, but the Learning Commons is often used to showcase and celebrate student work. Display panels, wall hanging, showcases, LCD screens are used to make learning public and to facilitate a core instructional practice of using models and critiques to enhance learning. I think it's also a great resource for our community to utilize that space in the evening hours. And there may be an amphitheater space for guest experts or student panels to present their work to an audience of faculty and or students. So that's how we envision the Learning Commons, multi-purpose, very flexible learning space. And, you know, when you think about the cafe, I happened to be at going to get some coffee last night, and I saw a bunch of students at Starbucks working together. You know, there's noise and things going on, but our students really do gravitate towards areas like that. And not that we're having a Starbucks at the high school, we are not, but that kind of feel. I know, John.
You lost me, Kathy.
Oh, sorry. We'll think about it.
But just before you leave, I appreciate all the coordinating, the 21st century learning.
Yeah.
I mean, even with my kids in the workforce, they're collaborating with people and that kind of thing. But I also have heard the need for quiet, and that they don't. I mean, one of the complaints was in our library today, we don't have quiet space. So
right.
I just wanted to understand that there were still quiet spaces.
Yes,
for even though a lot of kids are social and everything, sometimes they want a space to just be, themselves and do something that's quiet. So
and this design would allow for quiet spaces for students where they would just work independently, and we absolutely know that that is a need, and right now is a challenge in our library, not only with the mechanical noises, but also just with the amount of students that are gravitating towards that library to do work together and to study and to be on the computer, whatever they're working on. They really gravitate towards that area. So it would be in any design, as we've heard, the heart of our school.
But you feel there's enough quiet space
Yes.
to accommodate? Because I
And
hate
that-
to see,
It's definitely a mix
it's
of
just a concern.
spaces, whether
Okay.
it's, the small group space, larger group spaces, the classroom, but also like small rooms and places where students could work independently.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Meredith?
It seems to me just visually, maybe it's just because this looks a little bit tighter, that there is a more defined or delineated, separation between the community space and the student space. Where, again, would the entrance be for the community if they wanted to access The auditorium, where is that on the other side here? Or would they come in where it's marked student visitor and then go all the way down?
Currently, you're right, we have everyone coming in the front door and coming down here. And but has been a comment we've heard a couple times, so we can explore that. There is opportunity somewhere back here to get another entry on for event or public entry.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, like you had in option A, where you had a specific separate entry for that whole area.
Yeah.
The gym, the auditorium, and, yeah, I would think that's a need. Okay. Any
have
other
one more.
questions? Go ahead.
Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned that this is going to be potentially an emergency shelter for the community. Is there certain standards and criteria we need to build into this building to meet the needs of a emergency shelter?
There is, yes, and there's a whole building code section on it, and we collaborated a little bit with Russ Arnold a bit and talked about how many people based on the storm we had in, I think, 2010. So that's a work in progress, but there are some requirements such as there's seismic requirements, which in every case, in this case, as an option A, we would think about doing the gymnasium as it needs to be its own enclosure, so to speak. We need potentially some additional toilets. So there are some things that we have to consider.
So nuts and bolts like facilities, toilets, generators,
Yeah.
cooking facilities, or
It's only for 24-hour cycle, so we would be able to use the cafeteria and to
so.
accomplish that.
All right. So all that criteria will be all that planning
Yeah.
will be put into this naturally.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions?
I just have a quick question. Is there a psychological significance to this being drawn as a sketch, or is it just artistic?
It's just a work in progress is what it is.
So it's really drawn by hand?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And okay,
Yeah. No, it's just how we operate, I guess.
thank you.
Anything else? Okay, option C.
C, okay, let's move on to C. Okay, so, brand new building, and it's the site plan comes last, but I do have to explain the position of this building. As you look at these three floor plans, picture it up on top of the high fields, okay? So it's behind the school, and as we talk about the site plan later, a lot of that has to do with taking the building and moving it away from Route 4 as far as we can to get some queuing on the site plan so that you don't have the congestion on Monteith Drive. And also, if you think about where the 1928 building was originally positioned by the original designers and builders, they probably wanted to take advantage of all the views. The views on top of those, the soccer fields up there are wonderful, and it's probably the best asset that this campus has to offer, so why not try to take advantage of it? So think about that as I walk through the floor plan. So this says, okay, let's take the cluster concepts and stack them, again, 3 stories, but you take the lowest level and you dig them into the hillside. So the lower level of these clusters are almost at the level of where, say, the parking lot is at the gymnasium. There's a 40-foot change in grade between where the parking lot is at the gymnasium currently and up to those fields, okay? There's a higher little knoll there with wooded trees, but where the fields are itself, it's about a 40-foot change in elevation. So if this, weren't right at that level, lowest level, but up the hill a little bit, we could potentially carve it into the hillside and use that hill to our advantage. So this gallery space that we've been representing in all schemes A and B as a linear arrangement, this is sort of taking advantage of the contours of the hillside, okay? So we could have a cluster, and between the cluster, we could have a courtyard or a quadrangle. Think of the senior patio that's out there now. That could serve as that function. And then we would have the tech ed also nestled into the hillside with overhead doors and art stacked above it again. In this configuration, we could have the mechanical spaces where we don't need windows. We could have storage and things of that nature inboard and buried into the hillside. This dashed line represents the footprint above on the main level, which I'll get to in just a moment. But the whole big idea of this concept is taking advantage of an utilized portion of the site and capturing all the views and orienting the building so there's glass, not only in this gallery, but also for the clusters oriented out towards the Farmington River. We move upstairs. Students and visitors would enter here, and this is the gallery space that organizes the clusters again. If you think about Frank Locker's diagram way back where we started, this is a clear separation where this is the public zone right here, and this is the student zone. And somewhere in the middle is going to be that dashed black line where we could seal off the school for security purposes. So let's walk through the school really quick. We come in the entry, get dropped off. Luke will show you that in a site plan in a moment. We have administration out front again. You have the clusters all oriented out towards the south, glass along the edge here. The library or learning commons would be one of the first things you'd approach. As you go deeper in, you would have the cafeteria. Seating would be scattered through the cafeteria. We could have some soft seating against the glass. So the cafeteria isn't, in this concept, one big room with four walls. It kind of bleeds all through this gallery. And Kathy mentioned this, and as part of this visioning exercise, student display is part of what we would try to achieve in all these concepts. But in this gallery or any of the galleries, we would think of having two-dimensional and 3D student art displayed throughout. So you can actually see what some of the students produce. So that would be on display. As you get to the end of the gallery, we could have some special services, such as the Friends Room adjacent to the cafeteria, which occurs now, and then the art room, again, stacked above Tech Ed down below. So we have functions such as the servery and the kitchen all accessed for receiving. Luke will show you the site plan where there's a perimeter road on the back side. So as you move towards the public side of the building, let's come in the staff or event entry. You'd come into a shared lobby between the auditorium and gymnasium, new auxiliary gym as well in this scenario, all with a shared lobby. The fitness and PE spaces would support the gymnasium as well as locker rooms. And on this side, you'd have choral, band, all the practice rooms supporting the auditorium. And we'd have our studio black box theater adjacent to the auditorium as well. Moving upstairs, third floor of the cluster, again oriented off the hill. Then we have these holes represent openings in the floor plate where you can look down below into the learning commons and again look down below into the cafeteria. This is a large sort of an amphitheater seating arrangement, but also is the stair system to get up to this level. We would have guidance once again stacked on top of administration. And then we'd have more spaces adjacent to the learning commons, like the Edge Studio and some more makerspace functions. And here, we were thinking about, there's a potential we could consider future expansion someday if we chose to. We could infill this, we could design this facility, and in the event that we do need more space, that could be a logical place to put it. We also have a green roof that we could have access directly off of this level, walk right on, walk right off, which could be convenient. And then this from the public side is, again, the mezzanine levels of the auditorium and the studio theater. And Luke will walk us through the site plan.
So this is the site plan for the new option, a little bit different than the last two you saw here, as we're looking at, this is that 1928 portion. The existing building sits in this area here. What we've looked at is the main drive would continue up, continue around past the outfield of the ball fields, around your track stadium field. Parent drop-off would come through, loop through, and then you would exit back out. This is that entryway Paul mentioned that leads to that galley or gallery that runs here. Buses would come up and come this direction. This portion that's shown in green here, we'd look to have as a two-way street, which would service parking that would be down here for the athletic fields and also the building that's remaining here, which is slated for the Board of Education again in this scheme. This dash yellow would be buses and deliveries only. So buses would continue up, there would be a bus drop-off, they'd be able to loop and they'd come back out. We'd have deliveries that would be able to come up and service the kitchen, as well as the mechanical and the robotics and tech area there. They'd have their own. What we'd look at doing, again, the visual aspect here is the building's oriented in this direction because we're utilizing the slope and the hill, but also the visualization when you come up and you hit this intersection and you look up, feels very much like a college campus or a campus feel where you have the open green space here and you're looking upon the building which is set up and behind. And what we'd also look to do is we'd cut that hill and these fields down and we'd use some of that material to add to the buffer and try and berm along the outside as well, and just trying to maintain that there. So we'd actually berm and then try and sink that parking lot and the first part of the building slightly lower than the surrounding dense buffer that we'd incorporate here, so that we'd help to try and screen those neighbors that are surrounding here as part of it. Again, in the back, we'd look to have the staff parking, which would lead to that staff entrance, as Paul mentioned, and then student and visitor parking here. To the lower portion, once this is constructed, the old building would be able to be demoed, and we've proposed 3 natural grass fields or synthetic, either or, but they are multi-purpose fields in this scenario, so they would all 3 be able to accommodate full size, which replaces in kind the fields that are up on top. Again, maintains your tennis courts, your baseball field, and the track. And synthetic field, we would incorporate the required walkways to all of those, and then additionally look to add some more parking over in this area for athletic events, have parking that's down at the lower level there for those. We also looked at one additional scheme which kept everything the same, except we looked to leave that 2003 addition portion which had some locker rooms, as the ability to have that as an athletic building that's at the lower level down where the fields are, so that you would have locker rooms here that then service the 3 fields. This was the scheme where we were bouncing around potentially one of those fields or both of the full size being synthetic, because this last field is actually smaller. It would be a practice field, but it looks like we cannot foot the full third full-size field, so we would actually be reducing the number of fields you have on campus by 1 in this scheme. But it does give you an athletic building, and then the remainder of the site would remain the same as you saw in the last scheme. So that is option C.
Questions? Go ahead.
This building, obviously looking down on it and having an understanding that there's a lot of glass and whatnot, sounds like it's a very modern type of building. Do you have any idea what type of design this building would be? There's a lot of historic significance here.
We haven't done any of the three-dimensional work yet, but we plan to. But we would like to take our cues from the 1928 building wherever possible. I think that's loud and clear, and
Okay.
I think that's the right move.
Yeah, because well, the thing that comes to mind for me is in West Hartford, the American School for the Deaf, and it was a beautiful historic building, and they put up a modern piece of glass in front of it. Yeah. It's
You'll see sketches as it
about that.
progresses, and we have yet to do that. So.
okay.
Go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Again, aesthetics is lower on the list in the realms of important, but people are going to be driving on Route 4 looking up. Did you look into the possibility of moving the 2 parking lots that are to the left and the right of the existing building to a less prominent location?
We certainly can. We have to look at exactly, as we do our calculations, how much parking based on the Board of Ed space. We may be able to tuck some of it behind, in between that smaller field and there. We're not sure yet. We have to kind of look at that. Off to the left is similar kind of in location where it is now. Obviously to the right is more of where the existing courtyard is in the school.
It's very prominent. We're putting so much energy into, as John pointed out, what the new building potentially would look like and the old building. Looking up, you might be looking at cars first and foremost instead of the building. I mean, if we want to utilize the view going down towards the river, we also want to have a really impressive look when you're looking up. So I would just see if it's possible, and
Right.
maybe if you rework it, you can find another way to get another field.
Yeah, and what we can look at is I'm not sure we're going to fit a field. We've looked at that with the buffer and setbacks. But what we can look at is two things: is we screening and buffering fronting the parking lots, so you're not looking at the cars. But then also, as Paul mentioned, that we refer to as the basement level, where the bottom level of those clusters, the first level, actually still sits higher than this parking lot, the original school. So that again would kind of be, if you look at it in tiers, you're at the Route 4 level. And then you have the tier where you have your practice lacrosse field, and then it tiers up to this level. We're looking at potentially this area here being similar to that, maybe a step up, and then the bottom of this is actually a step up again, and then we get a step up to the main level, and then finally the third. So this portion where we talked about the possible courtyard and the bottom level of clusters would sit higher than all of the fields, because we just can't cut that whole thing down. As Paul mentioned, it's between 30 and 40 feet. So that's very tall for one building story in there.
Is this more challenging for ADA compatibility?
Not necessarily, because either scheme we have to bring from this point up to this point, whether it's the fields or the building, so it can work either way.
Just that would concern me. A couple things. One, just looking at the parking lots up behind the school, the thought of, is there enough parking down below for what the fields would need and the Board of Ed, and also just the look that that they're in front of the school, and what would you be looking at, and rather than the school, and that's what you're looking at first, and not in the parking around it. But you've got the parking right in front. I mean, I know you're trying to make it work, so, but it just seems like a lot more parking up by the school, and would be concerned about are you going to have a lot of people parking up there to come down to the fields? And did you happen to look, and it may not even fit, did you happen to look at a new school somewhere else on the site where it's like next to where the ball fields are, not the turf field, but on the other side or something?
We did. We actually looked at taking a scheme very similar to this with the building layout and trying to utilize this whole portion. What we found was trying not to impact this, because we know that was just done, and not to impact your post-tension tennis courts, which were just done, which were quite expensive as well. And then maintaining a separation between the two buildings, that we have to have minimum distance between the two for fire code reasons, and separation for construction. Just having enough. We were not able to make a building plan work that would put a building in this area and allow us to provide drop-offs, parking, all of those kind of flows with it. And try and maintain that existing building at the time, and then take it down. The building physically just didn't fit in this area without impacting either this or that, and shrinking the varsity baseball field to a point where we didn't feel it would actually fit as a varsity field on that side.
Because my other concern is just the neighborhood. And I know you said to make more of a buffer, but I know the Highland area well, and High Point West, and the houses are right there. Even if it were set down below, you've only got one area, not that whole, for the cars going around, and when I see the buses coming down, and just sharing a concern. I know you only have a certain, it's a footprint that you have to use, but
yeah, and those are
that's just a
concerns we've
concern I have.
looked at and will continue to keep in mind as we progress these, the parking in the front, as well as the bustering and the impact on the surrounding neighborhoods there.
Because I know if you had it down where those fields were, and you built a new school, it would, the kids it would impact the school itself with they'd have to go somewhere else to.
Right, and that's where earlier it was mentioned, trying
Right.
to avoid the look of modulars or temporary classrooms or that on the site, which we'd be looking at almost a temporary school to put the new or a number of different phases to try and turn an old into a new right on that location.
whereas the other phases seem to be you could maybe do certain things at a certain time so that then you transplant these kids over here now.
That's the goal, and as Mark mentioned today, they began the process just this afternoon of walking through each one of these and how that would be accomplished. So we'll have more of that in
Yeah.
the next round and after the first of the year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other, John?
When I look at the main level, or actually, when I look at option C, I don't see the alternative high school.
John, that would still, if this were to be the site plan,
Yep.
would still be down here in the 2003, and the Board of Ed would be here.
And if we use the other site plan, it would be somewhere else.
Yeah, we would have to figure out where that goes, so
Okay.
we're just exploring right now.
Okay. So a question,
It could probably fit all in the Board of Ed anyway, in there, so we can work on that.
okay. Looking at all three options, I know that the Board of Education put together the education specifications, which were quite detailed. I thought I heard earlier, I want to make sure I heard it, that each of these three options handle 100% of the educational specifications that were laid out.
Yeah, that's what we'll do. And the ad reno scenarios, some things may get compromised because we're dealing with existing spaces, such as the building just may not be efficient in terms of the corridor that we have to work with, or things of that nature. So we're taking the ed spec, designing for all three scenarios, and some will be more efficient than others. Some will have different price tags because of that.
Right.
Okay?
Thank you.
John?
Now, in looking at these three scenarios, I understand that we came up with these three scenarios because of the statement of needs, and all three of them basically cover the entire statement of needs. Now, was there any discussion, or what was the discussion that was put in with maybe, I don't know what the minimum dollar amount is. I don't know if you even know what the minimum dollar amount is or what the range is, but was there any discussion about, just maybe renovating the existing building in such a way that there is not so much demo? If I look at all of these plans, especially the two, there's massive amounts of demo involved, which means massive amount of reconstruction. So I'd be curious to know what discussion, if any, went into just basically renovating the existing structures with minimal amount of demo, because I don't see that in any of these, for a much lower price tag. And if you did that, how much of these ed specs would you be compromising, and which is where I would think a priority list might come into play?
Yeah, what really comes down to is meeting the ed spec, and based on sort of the cluster arrangement, it doesn't really fit within the one-story sprawl. So that really starts the chain reaction of how to think about this facility, and what portions are worth keeping and what are not. So it's really trying to meet the ed spec with that cluster direction that drives a lot of this.
So that's really the key driver.
It is, and we are charged with designing a facility 3 different ways that meets the ed spec. So that's where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? And I guess a question I wanted to ask was kind of along those lines, where if you, and you may not have done this, you may have answered the question, I guess is the NEASC report specifically identified a number of the things that were in this report, in what you talked about, Bill, having to do ADA, having to do, if we were to address the NEASC, and you may not have done this because there are some more encompassing things, do you know where we'd be? Do you know what I mean? Okay. Your charge as a committee then is to go through all the ed specs, as you explained before, and.
Statement of need.
I mean, yeah.
Statement of need, yes.
And if something we have to address is the NEASC report to continue our accreditation. and they've given us a timeline. I don't know what the timeline, I mean, I don't know the number of years, and if we need to address those issues to continue our accreditation.
Right?
So is there a way that while this is in the process, is NEASC willing then to say, if we're moving forward with something, is there a timeline for accreditation that they have to, I guess it's two questions. I mean, do we have to set a certain timeline to get to their accreditation issues, or we have a problem with accreditation? I guess that's a Kathy question.
Well, yeah, and I think it is, but it's my understanding that because we've started a building committee to address these issues, that we made a good faith effort to solve their issues, and I don't know if Madam Superintendent want to explore on that, but that was my understanding moving forward as a building committee.
But can I just say something?
Yeah.
If we went down this fourth route, aren't we just setting ourselves up potentially for somewhere down the road where we're going to be revisiting this again?
Well,
A whole renovation thing? So further down the road, we might end up spending a lot more money for doing something very minimal.
right. And I've had those questions asked to me, so I guess that's why I'm bringing it up here, is what would we do? My thoughts would be that if we were to address some of those issues, like ADA requirement of bathrooms, what it would mean was some of the bathrooms, you can't just go in and change them where they are. It changes the configuration of the area so that to accommodate what we need to do for NEASC seems to me to be, it's necessary to accommodate or to change the building to accommodate some of those things, rather than just go in and change a bathroom, if you know what I'm asking.
That's what we've seen as when we studied this building. The three different options, I think, conceptually, option A is maintaining not most, but the most part of the existing building as you could. Option B takes away a little bit more of the building than option A. And the clusters drive most of that design, as Paul said. In order to get rid of the outlying areas and the travel distances, the clusters solve all those problems, but those areas have to go away as a result of that. If you kept those, you'd still be having the issue of travel distance. And some of the conditions of the building at this point in time aren't up to snuff, right, either. So they'd have to be renovated or torn down.
Okay. And how does it affect our accreditation?
I'll give you a historic perspective. So we just had our visit last year, but 10 years prior, we had a visit. And in the report, they identified the following issues in the facility. So they talked about to decrease or improve travel distances, to improve crowded corridors, create informal collaborative spaces, quite a while ago, but aligned, address building systems, and address accessibility issues to exterior and interior areas. So fast forward to our NEASC visit, because those issues were not addressed, although we had a really glowing NEASC report, in Community Resources for Learning, we were put on warning for one of the 7 standards. And it's because the issues 10 years ago are still relevant today and haven't been addressed. So in the NEASC report that was recently provided to us, the areas that they talk about when it relates to the facility is address all facility issues that hinder full implementation of the curriculum, identify and address the limitations of the library media facility, and so that we could further develop a program delivery in that space. Remedy all facility issues to ensure compliance with all state and federal laws and regulations, including those related to ADA compliance issues, and to fully support the educational program. So because we were put on warning for one standard, we do have to submit many more reports to NEASC to show and to provide evidence that we're addressing these issues that they've identified. So we already have provided an update that we have a building committee, and that shows progress in addressing those areas. So for NEASC, they're satisfied that we're working on it, and they realize it takes time. But it is something that we just have to report back more, in a 2-year period where typically we would have more time. So we had to do an immediate update, and then they require just more reporting from the school. And then we will have an additional visit. Every 10 years we have a visit. So, that is something that they just keep monitoring our progress throughout. And if there isn't progress, if they see that progress isn't made, they will write, reports to us, and they will be directive in saying those things need to be addressed. And, but the fact that we're making a good faith effort means a great deal.
Okay, so we're not in jeopardy as long as we move forward with the intent to take care of those issues that were.
Absolutely. And again, this is one of 7 standards that we have warning on. All other standards were, excellent, and we got many accommodations. And so, that I think is important to say that, in every other area, very glowing report.
Well, and we know that our school system is one of the best in the state and the nation. We've been, how many systems have the blue ribbon schools we have?
Right.
I mean, we have an excellent school system, so, I'm glad that they see that as progress, and we can
Yes.
continue to move forward this way, so. Amy?
Just for the people who are watching, can you just explain the ramifications of us not doing this? Like, what would happen if we kept getting warnings and didn't move forward and didn't create the building committee? How would that impact our school, and how would that impact things in the future?
I think that because we do such a phenomenal job at the high school, that would always be considered by NEASC, and I think that they would just continue to be very clear about the need to fix that, but even fix the issues they identified. But even beyond that, we do have a report from the Office of Civil Rights. We do have a visit every 10 years, and very similar issues, especially in our fields and then throughout the school, of a lack of ADA compliance. So we also have to fill out reports and updates to the Office of Civil Rights. So there's several, areas that we are accountable to saying what kind of progress are we making, and we're doing that with NEASC, and we're doing that with the Office of Civil Rights. And as a community, I think we've shown that we are concerned with these areas, and we, since 2013, have been working on this and having various studies, several studies, in fact, to make an informed decision about next steps.
Any other questions? Meredith?
Just a quick comment. I think my assumption, and I could be incorrect here, is that we didn't see a more minimal design in addition to these, is because a more minimal design simply wouldn't address the infrastructure needs or the educational needs, nor would it be a building that lasted 40, 50 years, which is something that we've, at a council level, been consistently clear on. So that's my take on that. Just wanted to throw that out.
Meredith, just to clarify, because you've been so involved in the building department, it sounds like something less involved, we wouldn't even have a chance for the 19% or more of reimbursement from the state. Is that correct? So from a financial standpoint, it makes more sense to do more, because we potentially will get the money back from the state. Is that accurate, or no?
I don't know how to address the financial question.
I'm just saying that the way the state is putting it together, they're encouraging us to.
I mean, from my perspective, just because it was directed to me to begin, from my perspective, it makes sense to do it to address the infrastructure and the educational needs comprehensively now, so that nobody has to sit through this process again in 10, 12 years. Because I think that, because I think that costs the community more over the long run. So that's my financial viewpoint, but I don't know about state reimbursement.
If there's another reasoning.
You're right. I mean, if we just took the existing footprint and just did renovations to it, new windows, whatever, you would get total reimbursement, because you're now updating an existing building that they feel should be on the town's dime, not the state's dime. The repurposing is what gets you the renovation reimbursement, but not just changing out lights, changing out ceilings, making it look newer. That absolutely, you're right, 100% right. We would get a lot less reimbursement in that scenario. And it wouldn't solve, obviously, the statement of needs or the educational specification issues.
Thanks for jumping in.
And I guess I wasn't very, didn't express it very well. What I was trying to say was that when you address ADA compliance, as we've tried to, and energy efficiencies, it's more than just taking a bathroom and putting an ADA facility in there, a toilet or something, you know. It's there's a lot more involved in the process, and how many do we need and what do we need. So it does mean that the building itself has to take on changes. And so to accommodate that.
Yeah, if you're
and
enlarging a
that's something-
bathroom,
right.
you're taking it from some space that's
That's a classroom.
adjacent
Or that's
to
some-
it. That
right,
would,
right.
right.
And I think that it'll be really important for us to, the building committee, to, and you, and everyone involved, to be able to show that to the community, that these are the kinds of things that have to happen. At what level, we'll see. We don't know yet. There isn't a monetary value at any of the three.
Right.
And what kind of reimbursements does it mean with each one? And we'll see that as this, you know, in this process. And the refinements that you make to the building in this process. When you hear the community and you hear us, you hear the Board of Education and what they think. But I think, I started by saying we've been looking at this for a long time. It hasn't, even though this process has been really intense right now, it's been over a number of years that we know that the school needs some work. And we've looked to the school system to show us that and show us what the needs are. So we've done a lot of due diligence already with the needs. And it's, you know, I look forward to the community taking part in all the community nights you're going to have to show them that and show them what the differences are and what, you know, what's out there. And certainly, we've done it piecemeal in the past, some because of economic reasons. We've only been allowed to do certain things. Things have only passed because it was a certain number during some years. We all remember those.
Right.
So hopefully this will be a time to really do a comprehensive plan to move us into the future for the next 40 years. And, you know, we really appreciate all the hard work you've done so quickly, all of you. I mean, this isn't something, you've all spent a lot of time with this, and
Two things we
we'd
know
like
in
it
our
to go
two things we know in our industry: problems don't resolve themselves by themselves, and it doesn't cost less in the future. That's almost certainties in our industry. You know, moving forward. There is, absolutely there is.
Yes. Well, we see that with some of these areas,
Right.
that unfortunately they hadn't been addressed, but.
Right. The last thing I wanted to just go over, this is just an overall schedule, because this has come up in a couple of different versions of this presentation. So I'm working with the town manager and her staff. We came up with a very simplistic timeline. Now, it's simplistic in the sense of what you're seeing here, but back in mid-October when we were engaged, we put together a very detailed, complicated, Kathy loves, schedule or a work plan that gets us from, you know, mid-October to April 27th. She has her version that she's working with. We have our version that we're working with. Lots of schedules and lots of calendars. But this is something that I think is very simple for, I can get that off there, for you to just sort of grasp in terms of the schedule that gets us to the referendum in late April. So here we are in December, the development of the options that you heard about today. January, we take those options, we start to develop estimates for the construction and total project budgets. And what will be important for you to realize is that when they're presented, you're going to see a range of costs. Because they're so conceptual in nature, it's hard to come in with a finite number. So it's going to be a range for each of the options. Early February, an option is selected, a preferred option is selected, and the design team will start developing schematic design, which is a further refinement of that selected option. March, that design is completed, and we'll again do another estimate and develop a very finite total project budget during that period. And then in April, we go through the process of getting it on the referendum. So that just gives you a big picture perspective of how we get from December to April 27th. And again, there's lots and lots of detail. We meet twice a week just to make sure that we hit all those key milestones.
Right, and maybe if I can just interrupt a little bit, just at the council level, where we fit in on this schedule and where the building committee does. So at the end of January, that's when the Farmington High School Committee will be picking an option to recommend to the council. And they'll be doing that the last week of January. And if you remember at our last meeting, we scheduled a few meetings at the beginning of February. So it's, the building committee is going to recommend one option that's going to go to the council and to the Board of Education for the first week of February. And then the council is going to say that's an acceptable option to then go and work on that one option and firm up all the prices and everything that goes with it. So at the beginning of February, we have 3 meetings scheduled if needed to be able to go through, look at, the building committee will come with their preferred option with the hope that the council is going to agree with that option, and then we're going to move on. And the committee then is going to tighten up that number to have a number for us to get ready to go for an end of April town referendum.
Any questions about that, the timeline, or?
So Kathy, we're really just going to get the data for one?
You're going to get the data for one. That's what that, but the committee is getting the data for 3, and they're going to be, they're charged to making a recommendation to the council.
Will we be able to see that?
Oh, yeah, of course, sure. And I think Meredith will be updating the council as we go along.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's where we are today, and I think you have some idea where we're going in the future. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for listening to us this evening. I'd like to thank the committee members. They've done a fantastic job. Jean Barron, Justin Bernier, who's here this evening, Johnny Carrier, Hillary Donald, Dan Kleiman, who's also here with us this evening, and Michelle Hamilton. So we will continue to do our work and report back to you. I know you stay involved anyway through the process, but we'll formally report back to you, I think, sometime in the end of January. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and we really appreciate you being here this long for 2 hours to go through it with us. But it's really such an important thing for us to take the time to really listen and ask questions. So we really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What happens if this fails? Go back.
Okay. So at this time, there are no public hearings, no new items, public comment.
Pam Fisher, 5 Jules Court. Just want to say that how pleased and happy I am over the work of the Farmington High School Building Committee. I've attended all but 2 of their meetings, and I have been incredibly impressed at their thoroughness, their due diligence, the amount of man-hours that they have spent studying all the issues and all the reports surrounding our high school. I think they've all taken it to heart to look at what needs to be done and very focused on what's important for the high school. Speaking of someone who is really concerned regarding the ADA issues, I think just doing a minimal type of renovation will not fix all our ADA issues. Particularly, in fixing an ADA bathroom takes more than just raising a toilet seat. Right. It means taking out the adjacent stall. It means having space for 2 people because you got to help someone get out of that wheelchair, And we don't have but 1 ADA compliant bathroom in that high school. And that's where the Friends room is, and that's also kept locked usually because there's personal care equipment. So 1 true ADA bathroom, for all I know, is that 1 bathroom there. Yes, we have some stalls that are a little bit wider, but I have watched, I personally have not seen this, but I have had reports of a woman after an auditorium, one at the auditorium was there for a performance, struggled to get her wheelchair into the bathroom that's in that lobby. So that was 2 years ago before that Friends bathroom was locked, and someone actually took them down there and took them to that bathroom. We have an issue of not having enough bathrooms in our high school, ADA or not. We have, I believe, still 2 offline because of sewer problems, which were also there last year when my son was still in school. We also have in the 3rd floor, I believe, of the old building, the 1928 building, ceiling problems, where some of the ceiling is an issue in the art classrooms. We have 23 separate entrances, and just renovating what is there is not going to solve those 23 different entrances for safety and security. We'll still have kids cutting through the circle to get in, to try and get to their classes on time because of the sprawl. So there are more issues in regards to just bare minimum renovation. And quite frankly, I understand, at least 3 years ago when we first talked about the auditorium, just putting in new seats, which, by the way, are almost 40 years old and are breaking, and we can't get new ones anymore because they don't make them anymore. If you were to just say, okay, let's just fix all the seating, well, now you've bumped out your grandfather clause. You got to make it ADA compliant. So you can't, if you do renovate, you still got to do the ADA compliance, from my understanding. I could be wrong, but that was what I was told 3 years ago. So again, I think that a lot of work has been done, it's been very, very comprehensive and looking at all the reports. And I'm just, as a resident, has been very pleased and the selection of the people who are serving, and bless them. They have put in a lot of hours and they do not get paid. And I don't think enough people recognize that, just like you guys don't get paid. And the amount of hours everyone has spent for the benefit of this town. I think it's incredible that we have people who volunteer to do this, but I'm thrilled with the work they've done. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
Good evening, Beth Kittner, 24 Farmstead Lane. I've been trying to follow this process pretty closely, although not nearly as closely as Pam. I just haven't been able to commit the time to meetings and such, but I have been paying close attention to the designs since they came out to the building committee on the 30th of November, and so I've had some time to kind of put some thoughts together. I just hope that everyone involved in the process, all the stakeholders, community, residents, town council members, Board of Ed members, and building committee members are really trying very hard at this stage of the game to keep an open mind to all 3 options and what that might look like, and not discounting one or more options because of assumptions around cost. I mean, we've heard several times tonight, they just aren't at a position where they can give figures for you to use that, at least at this point, as far as what your preferences might be or what you may think may be the best option. But to keep an open mind, I mean, we don't know about appearance and how the building might actually look. So there's just a lot of assumptions that I think we need to be careful to stay away from at this point and keep an open mind. Just because this is the first time I've seen these 3 options presented this way, I just wanted to make a couple comments about each option. My gut reaction to the option A is that it really doesn't do much for the sprawl that we have is such a big problem. I mean, I don't know if we've been able to, they don't have exact measurements, but to see that end-to-end, students, although we have the clusters, they still need to get to band rooms and the gymnasium and the auditorium throughout the day. And so there still is some travel time there. And just keeping so much of an existing structure that we know there's so many difficulties with, and the age of those structures is like trying to fit a new environment and a kind of a new school environment into an existing footprint that is just not working. I don't see that that makes too much sense. But again, you have to look at all 3. Option B seems to have better flow. I would hope for traffic and just that kind of congestion that we see at passing time at the high school. It just seems a better layout and a little more better flow there. Option B, I don't know. I mean, I think when you design something new, we went through this with our home a few years ago, deciding to renovate or new, and new, you can kind of put things where is most reasonable and effective. And then, of course, going all new has a lot of efficiencies and less maintenance cost in the long run. I think the increased capacity for the auditorium wasn't necessarily highlighted, but going from a situation now where I think we're at a few hundred, but being able to really both for the school population, have 2 grades there together is important for the school community, but also the community as a whole, to have a larger auditorium space where I could see things like author visits or community conversations or community events, and perhaps even bringing in income for rentals for community groups and other organizations that would definitely see this now as a spot that they would use for their events. I think that's something also to consider. The accreditation issue, I think, is huge. I lived in a community when I was ready to go to high school, and our town was very close to losing their accreditation on their high school. And at that point, my parents said, that's it. There's no way you're going there. It's going to be considered as part of your college applications, and colleges are going to look at your diploma, whether it's from an accredited school or not. And I think that would be, any kind of risk to our accreditation would be a big mistake. And lastly, I think when we look at the cost ranges, I know we're going to get to a point where we have cost ranges for option A, B, and C. I'm just curious whether or not at that point we would be able to have, for residents and other decision makers in this process, not just that figure for construction, taking into account some efficiencies and maybe some reimbursements, but also how that's going to translate into how it'll affect our tax bill. Because I think the overall cost might just be overwhelming, but if we kind of translate that to how is that going to affect my tax bill, and really what are we getting for that increase in our taxes, just puts it in a better light, or, it's good information for us to have. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, reading of the minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the November 15th, 2016 regular town council meeting.
Second.
Any questions or corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Reading of communications. Kathy.
Just have 2 in your packet. One is from Sharon and Andrea, who work for our senior center, and they sent the council just a thank you note for recognizing the senior center, for Senior Center Month. And the other correspondence is from the Unionville Historic District and Properties Commission, and I think in your packet you had a booklet for self-guided tours, and so they have created that, which was, I thought, a very nice document, and they just wanted you to have a copy of it.
Yes, it is. Thank you. It is very nice. Report of committees. UConn. Our next meeting is January 27th, 2017.
We have a DOC meeting on Friday.
On that same day?
UConn, this Friday. The
Oh.
UConn DOC
Oh.
committee is meeting.
Okay.
Which I will attend.
Oh, okay. Great, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Land acquisition.
Nothing to report.
Green efforts.
Nothing to report.
Joint Town of Farmington, City of Hartford Committee. I'm happy to report we had a meeting on Monday, and we met with Kathy and Rose, and I were able to go, and we met with Adam Cloud and probably about 8 other people from Hartford. And it was a very, very good meeting, and we're going to be talking every month. They did have they're waiting now for the closing of the fact that the $5 million will go into the pension fund. And we're just very positive about this thing's moving right along now. So we'll just keep you posted. Bike Advisory Committee.
So I just want to take this opportunity. I think you all remember a few years ago where Farmington was able to achieve bicycle-friendly status at the bronze level, and it was a big achievement for us. Well, just recently, over the last month, the City of Hartford received their bronze status, and they are now considered a bicycle-friendly community. So I just wanted to express to folks in Hartford my congratulations and to recognize them, and to understand that this brings a number of places together. Hartford, West Hartford, Farmington, they're all bicycle-friendly now, and this is going to raise some possibilities for the future.
Thank you. Gateway Committee.
Nothing new to report really on that committee. We're going to meet again in January. in B&L will be finalizing most of the data collection that they're doing on parking and some marketing, and with some additional site views and drawings also. So that meeting will be third week in January on a Thursday. We'll get back on that.
And Peter, I would just tell people, this is really the final opportunity
Yes.
for people to come out and speak, because after this, we probably will vote on it and we'll go to TPZ.
Correct.
So what is the date, just so we can, it's the third,
January 19th,
January 19th at 5 o'clock.
Right.
It's in this room.
right here?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Webpage.
Well, because this will be my last report on the webpage, sadly, I am pleased to report that we have updated the fave icon for our website to reflect the town seal, which is the little tiny icon that's in your tab when you have a tabbed browser.
I gotta check it.
Thank you. Thank you.
What can I say? I needed something.
Farmington High School Building Committee, I think we
Well,
kind of.
it's hard to top the last 2.5 hours, right? But I do want to mention to the public that there's a meeting tomorrow at 4:30, but the larger point is that these meetings are now being videotaped, and all of the meetings are available to the public from a link that is currently on the town's website, correct, Kathy? The project itself also has a dedicated web page, so these plans are on the web page, the PowerPoints are on the web page, and they're also working to, and I'll throw this to you, Kathy, I'm not sure if it exists yet or not, but they're working to have a feedback mechanism available that way too, so that public who isn't able to make the meetings can still provide input and ask questions and be a part of the process. And so that's all driven through the website, which again has the meeting videos available now.
And that is available now.
The input
Yep,
part?
it
Okay.
is. Yep,
great.
we've gotten quite a few
Oh,
people.
okay, great.
Yep.
And there are other community meetings set up, right?
Yep, and there are community meetings set up.
So it's got a calendar as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Report of the council chair and liaisons. I have a couple things to report on. One, we had our Farmington Valley Collaborative meeting on December 1st, and that's a regional meeting with about 12 different towns. And we are continually having a discussion about state funding and the situation in Hartford. So we're keeping each other posted on what we hear and what's going on. I also attended a CROG meeting on December 7th. And again, concern over the cutbacks that may happen from the state. There was discussion about the possibility of a 20% reduction in the LoSEP and the STEEP grants for next year. So that is certainly a concern, and we usually are able to recoup funds through that, but we'll see. We'll just keep everybody posted as to what happens. And I was also at a meeting that on November 30th that was with Metro Alliance, and the same discussions. Actually, that was led by Oz Griebel, and Luke Bronin was there. And there was discussion about what was happening in Hartford, what might happen in Hartford, and a lot of discussion about the possibility of using sales tax to fully fund the pilot. If that ever were to come to fruition, it could mean $4 million for Farmington. But, and it did come out in the paper the other day, the number of dollars that would go to various communities. So we'll certainly just keep an eye on that and see what happens in the future after the first of the year. So that's it for me. Board of Education liaison.
Nothing to report.
Unionville, UVIA.
I will just throw out that UVIA is in the process of kind of renewing its mission, renewing its bylaws, and they're absolutely welcoming new members at this point, if not even for full UVIA board membership to take on subcommittee work for events or beautification around town. And they do have a website. It's uviact.org. John, do you know, or UVIA just
I don't know off
.org?
the top of my head.
I think it's uviact.org, and that the contact information for the leaders of UVIA is on there if anybody's interested in getting involved.
Thank you. That just brings to mind, I wanted to thank everyone in the community and everyone through UVIA and Farmington that helped with the decorations on the bridges and through the center of Unionville, they just look gorgeous. And I know it's contributions through many in the town and the town that allow that to happen. So thank you all very much for that. That's gorgeous. TPZ.
Some good news report. TPZ approved a 12-unit condominium complex for the area of where Chuck's Steakhouse was, which will be kind of a big catalyst for that whole gateway area there. So there'll be very high-end condominiums placed in there, and it will probably just set off a new trend here of people being very interested in making that area happen in terms of other development and in terms of housing, office, and housing in there. So a big step last night for that project to be approved in that area.
Great. Thanks.
Peter, what's the timeline? When are they going to start building?
They didn't get into any timelines last night, Amy. So I would say probably pretty fast. I think the backage road has been cut in there pretty deeply, so probably I wouldn't be surprised if they're in there by March, and that's me just knee-jerking an answer there.
Okay, thanks.
Economic development.
Nothing to discuss.
Human relations.
No report.
Chamber.
The Chamber of Commerce is having their business after hours tomorrow evening at Farmington Bank at 5:30, and you are encouraged to wear your ugliest Christmas sweater.
There's actually a company that is the ugly Christmas sweater company, which is pretty cool. So, anyway, thank you. Other liaison reports.
How about the WPCA?
I had nothing to report,
Oh.
so I was just going to let that go.
Sorry. I apologize. Meredith, nothing?
Nothing.
Yeah, our $50 million project. Report of the town manager, Kathy.
You have the written report in front of you. We have the state grant report, and there really has been no change since the last month that we reported. So you can see that we have, our adopted budget has $5,505,000 that we expect in revenue, and we've received to date $4,008,969. Again, just what we're happy about is that we have received the total of our pilot, which is our largest grant. So we'll keep on reporting every month to see how we do. I just wanted to let you know, this was on the website, and the state has already has been publicizing it, but there is a public information meeting that will be held on December 14th, which is tomorrow night at 16 Munson Road, and this is to talk about the CROG study. If you remember that's that study for that whole Yukon area where they're going to look at sidewalks, streetscape, overall traffic pattern. So they're having a public information meeting. It starts from 6:30 to 7, and then the presentation and discussion from 7 to 8:30 p.m. And that, again, is at 16 Munson Road in Farmington.
Kathy, what are the boundaries of that area?
Off the top of my head, it's the whole Yukon area, up Munson Road, down by Talcott, even going past Yukon that way too on
Almost to the
Route 4.
Farmington
Yeah.
border of West Hartford?
I don't know if it goes already to the border. I can check on that for you, but it's a pretty large area because the whole thing, this came out of when Yukon was doing the expansion, that they didn't look at a street, like a whole overall pattern.
Right.
So we wanted them to look at everything, including the neighborhoods over on that side, and then heading towards West Hartford, that area too.
Does it go all the way to exit 39? Or is that not part of it anymore?
Towards exit.
No, does it go all the way, if you continue on, moving away from West Hartford?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so
Yes.
it would incorporate that exit
Yes.
and what they've done so
Yeah,
far with.
absolutely, absolutely, yes.
That's it. Will you be attending? Who is attending?
Someone from the engineering department will be there, yep.
Okay.
And, well, we're pleased to announce, after our second round of trying to, we applied for our neglected cemetery grant, and the first time we did not get an award, but this time we did for $2,000. And this will be for Scott Swamp Cemetery, and it's just to do some repairing of fences and walls and clearing weeds and some various things. So it's $2,000.
Can I have a motion to accept, excuse me, the manager's report?
I move to accept the December 13th town manager report.
Second.
Any questions, other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. Okay, appointments. And-
I have L10.
Yep.
That I move that Kathy Egan be appointed to the Farmington Valley Health District for a 3-year term, beginning immediately and ending December 31st, 2019.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Somebody
Abstentions?
done a character check?
Really?
Congratulations.
Thank you, Peter.
Old business, none. New business, 1.
I move to disband the webpage committee and to thank them for their work.
Second.
The webpage committee has completed their charge.
And we're glad the emblem's on there.
And we will still be updating the web page as we go along, and because now it's much easier to do that, and we still get quite a lot of compliments about the web page. Good job for the committee.
Well, thank you very
And
much.
staff.
John.
John Laundrie.
Yeah. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. And 2.
I move that the taxes due on the October 1st, 2015 grand list for the property known as the 8809 Settlement Road be abated.
Second.
We do this when we purchase open space. It's a paperwork that we have to make sure that we're not paying the taxes, the town, so that's what we're doing. We're abating it from ourselves. That's what we do.
Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, 3.
I move that the taxes due on the October 1st, 2015 grand list for the property known as 8885 South Ridge Road be abated.
Second.
This is the same thing. This is the piece of property we acquired in July of 2016.
Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 4.
I move to award bid number 251 janitorial service at various town buildings to Choice Service Solutions LLC of East Windsor, Connecticut, at a low bid price of $79,583.80.
Second.
I think there's an error here. Joe, I'm sorry. Choice Bidders is from Farmington, Connecticut, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
He submitted a bid, he was in Farmington, he's temporarily in East Windsor, plans to move back to Farmington.
Okay.
So it's correct as
It is correct as written. This is for a low bid, and it's the vendor to perform janitorial services in 9 town buildings.
Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, 5.
Okay. I move to approve the following property tax refunds as shown on agenda item N5.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, and we have no executive session?
Nope.
Session.
So can I have a motion for adjournment?
Yes.
Move to adjourn.
Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
10 minutes.
Thank you.
Keep that track. See how we do.